Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight is December 14th, 2009. This is a public hearing for the City of Lowell Zoning Board of Appeals. And there are several petitions on tonight. So what we'd ask is anybody wishing to address the board to please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please sign your name and address for the record. It's important you do this so we don't have to interrupt you when you start speaking. That would help. So we're going to take the agenda in order. We have a continuance first from the last meeting, and that is ZB 2009-44, special permit request for telecommunications. The applicant is Clear Wireless LLC, 525 Pawtucket Boulevard, for the installation of telecommunications panel antennas, 3 of them, dish antennas 2, and related equipment inside storage room on the penthouse level of Clear Wireless according to section 7.6 of the zoning ordinance. Would any representative of Clear Wireless please address the board? Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Scott Lacey with the law firm of Prince Lowell, Glufsky & Ty, representing the applicant.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
L-A-C-Y. It's our understanding that the board had 2 follow-up issues from the last hearing. One was with respect to whether or not the property owner had the authority to install a rooftop facility on this particular property. It's our understanding that there was a letter sent by Kurt Shillington from Princeton Grandview LLC, the property owner, that indicated that, in fact, the property owner does have the authority to have a facility on this rooftop. I also believe that the board had asked us to look at another alternative candidate. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Andrew Thompson to just discuss that alternative candidate and whether or not that would be viable or not.
Thank you, sir. Could you just sign your name, please, and your address? We just need that for our minutes.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. As Attorney Lacey pointed out, I know that we had spoken about looking for some additional, more commercial candidates in the area of this search ring. Today, I actually redrove the ring, and I believe there was one particular building that Mr. Chairman had indicated would be of some interest potentially to us rather than going on a residential building. I believe the tallest commercial building in this stretch of Pawtucket Boulevard that would potentially fall into our search ring is 1001 Pawtucket Boulevard. And I believe it's the Harris building, if I remember correctly. It's approximately a 45-foot concrete building, and it was determined by our RF engineers that that building would be far too low to provide. It would be far too low and too far out of our coverage area to provide the needed coverage that we were looking for in this area to fill what is considered by us to be a significant coverage gap.
I guess what we're looking for, if you recall last time, do you have any, other than driving around and checking, do you have any data that would back up what you're representing?
We do have coverage maps that show what the propagated coverage would be from that particular site. And again, driving along Pawtucket Boulevard, other than, as we had discussed, we originally pursued the Saab building for an installation as Sprint is already located there. It was determined that there was not enough room for Clearwire's equipment at that rooftop installation. As such, we moved to the next what is actually the highest building on the road, which is 525 and 527 Pawtucket Boulevard. And as T-Mobile was already up there, obviously the way that we locate these sites, it was considered a co-location where obviously a wireless carrier is already located. Today, in doing an additional drive of the ring, I did find one other I guess higher than 2-story building, and that's again 1001 Pawtucket Boulevard. And we can show what the coverage maps would look like from that particular facility and essentially show that they do not fill the coverage gap that we're looking to fill with this facility.
Good evening, everyone. My name is AJ Sawant, and I'm the radio frequency engineer for Clearwire. With me, I have a couple of plots, especially of the location that Andrew just mentioned. Let me go over. Yeah.
If anybody in the audience is here on this petition and wants to see this, I know you can't see it, You're welcome
Yeah,
to come
but we
through the
can-
gate and stand over here and, you know, take a look at what he's doing, or you can stay where you are. I'm just thinking if you can't see it. Go ahead.
The red dot in the center. The red dot in the center is where our proposed location is, and the yellow dot here on the left is where the property, the commercial property that was identified by Andrew, and the green color you see here is what you would get from that 45 feet rooftop commercial property, and the next plot would show how it fits with our neighboring sites, what we have in our plan. So this map has coverage from the 45 feet commercial property as well as surrounding neighboring sites. As you can see, this portion above north of Pawtucket Boulevard lacks coverage, so does south of Middlesex Street here. And if you compare this to the coverage from the proposed site, which basically covers the whole thing and provides the connectivity for our network. And let me also show you the coverage from our proposed site by itself. So this is the coverage we would get from our proposed site. That's it. If there are any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on the board?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. Now, now, are you familiar with the Macom building?
No.
Well, it's about approximately probably a quarter mile up the street. It's about 30 stories. I mean, it's equivalent to almost Cross Point, which we approved for Clear Wireless about a month ago.
Yep.
Was that explored, may I ask? Because that would be a far better location than what you're seeking at this time.
Do you know where that is?
Which, I guess, so the one that we looked at today was west of Princeton Grandview. Is it to the west or is it to the east as you're heading, I guess, more in towards in towards the city?
It would be leaving the city to the west.
To the west?
Yeah.
So I drove, the building that we looked at is along this bend, 1001, and this is approximately about 3/4 of a mile from this proposed site, Princeton Grandview. And I did not see, how many stories is it?
I would say approximately 30 stories. It's a huge office building.
Well,
I don't see how you can miss it.
It may be outside our.
I mean, the ring, the radius of the ring and what we're trying to provide is obviously a finite search area. So in driving the search ring and looking for candidates within the parameters that we have defined as being able to fill this coverage gap, that site did not fall into and again, I drove, I would say about well over a mile to the west, and
Well, this is
30-story
within-
office building was not on Pawtucket Boulevard.
Most certainly is, and it's within a mile. I can tell you that.
Within a quarter mile or a mile?
A mile is a significant distance in terms of this coverage map, and perhaps it'd be better just to go through the basics of exactly how big the coverage gap area is in terms of where the target is. Because there may be other tall buildings that are a mile and a half away that would actually cover different parts of Lowell and would not actually cover this significant gap in this particular area. So therefore, they would not be considered a viable alternative for this particular site.
The green highlighted area is where you're seeking coverage, correct?
No, this is where
This is the actual coverage that they get from that site.
Yeah, that you would,
So-
exactly.
Yeah.
But where's,
Well, I want to say that building would be in this highlighted area. I could be wrong.
Is the address on Pawtucket Boulevard?
Yes.
Because I can
We can search.
honestly say that I drove over a mile west of this location and it was not located within it.
so basically what you have is this is the existing coverage from the neighboring sites. So the gap in coverage that you're trying to pick up is from these linked sites here to fill in this area in this direction. So that the end user, as they're moving from this direction this way, has no break in their coverage service. So anything that goes towards this direction, if it leaves gaps here and here, you're leaving a significant gap in coverage. So something that's too far to the west in this direction wouldn't be a viable alternative, and that's what the RF engineer was explaining with respect to the other site. So in terms of, this is the target area here. So I mean, I apologize if this came up at the last meeting, but I mean, we could certainly get a specific address.
I believe it did, and it just amazes me how you guys, you don't even know what I'm talking about. It's a monstrosity for a building,
What-
and it would,
But again, just because something's a really, really tall building, if it's not in a particular coverage gap area or there's a better alternative near there, for example, if there's a tower near there, whether it's in Lowell or nearby town, the carrier may prefer to go on the tower because when you get too high, you may have issues linking up to your nearby sites. So just because it's a really tall building isn't the end of the analysis. It's whether or not that tall building is located in the area, what's called the search ring, that they're trying to provide connectivity and coverage. I apologize, I don't know the specific address, so I don't know exactly where it's particularly located, but I mean,
And we thought.
Okay, that answers
the
my question. Thank
property
you very much.
dimension was rooftop.
Yes, I apologize for the miscommunication. I know that I was to drive in that direction, and like I said, I drove over a mile knowing the bounds of the ring and did not run into that building.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Bill, do you have anything?
Is there going to be 4 locations at the end of the day that you're looking for?
4 locations throughout the city of
Well,
Lowell.
you got Pawtucket Boulevard. We already approved a pole over off of Mammoth Road, correct?
The pole was on East Meadow.
Okay, East Meadow. We approved that one. This is your second one. We approved the Wang Towers, correct? And then
Cross
we-
Point.
Cross Point, I'm sorry. And then we have the church location on Andover Street.
No, there are more than 4 locations in the city of Lowell where Clearwire's proposing to have installations. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, as I'm not handling all of those sites, but there will be more than 4 locations. Again, they are a wireless carrier looking to provide seamless coverage to the residents of the city
So
of
you're
Lowell.
going to have more than 4?
Absolutely.
But
I mean,
you've only presented 4 so far, correct?
Exactly. So we haven't, I mean, they're going to be seeking locations similar to Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, and I believe that they would, they certainly have more than 4 locations, and we would be looking to go in similar locations.
But the Pawtucket Boulevard location we're talking about right now, what you're explaining to us is that's your best location for the coverage map for that particular ring.
Yes, sir, that
Correct.
is correct.
So if you were denied that location,
It would be
What-
considered a significant gap in coverage that we were not able to fill
Okay.
based on the structures that are in that area. We would be looking, if we were denied from going on this rooftop, I believe our only other alternatives would potentially be raw land, new tower sites in this area to provide coverage.
but you are planning on coming before this board with more locations in the
Yes,
future?
as Clearwire builds out their network, they will certainly
Yep.
need more locations throughout the city of Lowell.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Jim.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
At the previous meeting, when you made the presentation pertaining to Andover Street, there was a gentleman who represented the neighborhood who spoke eloquently and introduced, I think, all of the board members to perhaps the incorrect term is new technology, but certainly new placement of these boxes and the ability to communicate on telephone poles. Is that something that is now you're going to consider as a viable option for any of these locations that infringe upon residents?
Actually, what he may have been referring to is what's called a distributed antenna system, or DAS network. A DAS network is you have nodes, which are antennas, mounted on a certain number of utility poles, depending upon the coverage area that you're trying to cover. There would be cabling that would run to a central location for the network to process. The coverage gained from those types of nodes is not the same as what you see on these coverage maps in terms of like covering the entire area. Those types of sites really only stretch literally on one side of the road to the other side of the road. So in some cases, depending on how far properties are set back from the road, they would not reach it. They're actually used to close smaller gaps in coverage and to complement what's called a macro site or a full site, which is what you see at T-Mobile, like a typical rooftop installation. They have been used in certain places like the Vineyard, Nantucket, to close certain gaps that they have, but those are also in conjunction with traditional cell sites on the islands.
Not an alternative then that you can use in these situations?
No, because of the coverage area is too large. So like if
which would mean that it's more expensive?
No, it's just that they don't provide the same type of service to the end user.
Okay.
So when you're covering a large footprint, you need a certain level of service so that the end user basically gets what they bargain for, or what you're selling them, the services. A DAS network doesn't provide that same level of service. It's more of a complementary piece.
Vesna? I have a question on the colored map. Can you lift that up again?
The existing coverage?
Well, I'm looking at my copy here. So if you can identify the Rourke Bridge, which is from your red dot, say, it's 7 o'clock on a clock. If you look down to Rourke Bridge, you'll see the Rourke Bridge, and then you see, if you go directly across and up, you'll see the outline of a building. If you keep going over, you know what, why don't I just show you on this, and then you can correlate it to that. This may be the building that Mr. Belanger is referring to, I don't know. So that I know that's about where it is, because it's just west of the Rourke Bridge.
This is your coverage gap. Look in this
Okay.
It's a large,
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah. All right, why don't we go, just because we're on the air, so we, yeah. So I guess what I'm referring to is that it looks like a larger structure, at least on this, and he's referring to the Macon building. I don't know how many stories it is. It may not be 30 stories, but it is clearly a building that you can't miss. It's a private company. It's just west of the Rourke Bridge. But obviously there's nothing, I mean, it may be the building you looked at, but you said that's a 45?
It was approximately 3 to 4 stories.
Oh, yeah, that's probably the building. I don't think it might be 30, but I don't think so.
no, it's taller than 3 or 4 stories, I know that.
Do you know what the companies are that are inside the building, or what, if there's a name? It's called the Macon building?
Yeah.
I believe it's still called the Macon. Maybe that perhaps the residents can shed a little light on this. Is it still?
Well. Yeah.
That's another problem.
Right, what you can see.
Back into the parking lot.
What you can see is the parking lot, it is set a little bit back from the street. So if you were driving by, you may not notice it. I think this time of year you might, but you may not as well. So it's just west of the Rourke Bridge. But in any event, so your argument is that you feel as though you have no other viable alternative other than the building that is before us now, and you're saying that it's not a money-related thing, because I guess our question is there a way, regardless of the cost, is there a way to fill this gap that's another viable option that has nothing to do with the cost of it?
The distributed antenna system for Clearwire right now is just, it's not a real option for them based on the technology that they use, specifically the backhaul links. Those have to have direct line of sight from site to site to operate. And so the majority of the telephone poles, which is typically where you would see these DAS antennas located, wouldn't provide the height for the site to function and actually fill the coverage gaps that we're trying to propose, or that we're trying to fill.
Could you acquire that technology to do that?
It's not, the technology, as Attorney Lacey said, doesn't exist to fill these large macro coverage gaps. Again, it's just for very small, sometimes one street in a city would be covered by a DAS system.
Okay, and I think last meeting, if you remember, it may have been a few meetings ago, but the neighbors brought up an issue about something wasn't allowed there, the purchase and sale agreement, and where you were putting it on the side of the building was specifically restricted. So have you been able to either, A, confirm or deny that, or talk to the neighborhood association and, or the condo association?
I do believe the letter from the condo association that was submitted to the board does address that. It was delivered November 20th from Princeton Grandview, and it specifically calls out in Section 14, declarant reservations, that Princeton Grandview has the right to own, operate, install, maintain, repair everything from cellular, microwave, relay towers on the roof of either or both buildings.
All right, did you have any discussions with any of the people who were opposed to it last time?
We only had discussions with Princeton Grandview, with the actual condo association and the owners.
And I guess just to clarify, I think the intent in question was the one that it was called facade mounted on the side.
Right.
But it's actually going to be designed and installed exactly as the T-Mobile installation, which is actually mounted to the roof and then goes over. So it looks like it's to the facade and painted to match, but it will be affixed to the roof. It will be designed exactly like the T-Mobile installation.
So it's actually not going over the side?
Well, it's called a facade because when you look at the facade, that's the facade that it's on, but it's not going to be affixed to the facade. It's mounted to the roof and then over.
Okay.
And I understand that that's something that's not clear from the plans, because the plans just call it a facade-mounted antenna. But it's made clear that under the terms of the lease and as far as their authority in terms of their master deed, it has to be affixed to the roof and then go over, which is what T-Mobile did. And it will be done exactly the same way as T-Mobile's.
So a possible condition would be that it does not involve the side of the building, it's fixed to the top?
Yeah, a condition would be that it would be installed the same way T-Mobile's is, because that's exactly how T-Mobile's is done.
But what if T-Mobile is installed wrong?
Then it has to be affixed from the roof.
Well, that's
over
what I'm
the
getting
side.
at. I'd
Yeah,
rather have
that's
that
fine.
condition rather than
Yeah, that's fine.
install like T-Mobile, because I'm just not sure about their installation. Okay, Corey, anything further? Or
No, not right now, Mr. Chairman.
Rick, anything?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm a little baffled by that one. It looks like it's affixed to the facade. It sticks over the face of the building. So you're telling me you're just taking the verbiage and using it so you can attach it to the roof and hang it over and paint it the same as the facade color and say it's attached to the roof, right? Basically?
It has to be, per the terms of the master deed, affixed to the roof. So as the T-Mobile installation, they're affixed to the roof. They go over because you want the coverage to come out sideways. So it is, when you look at it driving by, it looks like it's mounted to the facade and is painted to match. But the reality is what it's attached to is actually the roof.
So basically, that's what you're doing. You mounted it to the roof and hanging it over. I didn't know if that was in the decision or not from when this was before my time. Through you, Mr. Chairman, or to the building commissioner, if that was part of the decision. Was any of that verbiage put into the decision about this facade mounting and stuff?
On the antenna that's already mounted?
Yes, this is the one right there, Bob, that's mounted to the facade. It's got the facade.
I don't have that
They
in
say
front of me,
it's
so I couldn't respond to that.
Well,
That's all I mean.
I guess that's my issue. If T-Mobile did it that way, but it's not done right,
It looks the facade to me, and they're just using the verbiage, I guess, Mr. Chairman, to say, we bolted to the roof and we hung it over, so it's attached to the roof, but it's not attached to the facade, but it's the same, one and the same to me. It's just kind of different, I guess, I don't know. That's what it looks like to me, it belongs on it's a facade. And I can understand where, some of the people that bought condominiums there now are looking at this saying, what are we doing here? This is a building that we bought into, now it's starting to look, with the antennas hanging off, and now you're gonna have more antennas attached to the roof, hanging over, painting them the same as the facade. That's my question. It's,
Well, Mr. Bienvenu, just to let you know, the board vote initially denied that petition, and it was reversed by a higher authority.
authority?
So-
All right. That's the only question I have, Mr. Chairman.
okay. And I guess the confusion last time, again, was with it was mounted to the side and, where it was coming from, and what it looked like. I think that's what some of the condominium owners had an issue with. So, I think that's that's probably one of the issues here. So, okay, anything else, sir?
If the board would like, we'd be happy to look at the Macon building and confirm its exact height and whether or not it would be a viable alternative.
Okay, and what I'll do, we'll finish the public hearing and we'll see if anything comes out of this. So, anybody here wishing to speak in favor of this petition, in favor? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anybody here wishing to speak in opposition of this, in opposition?
I think you got the pen. Paul Mercier, 527 Pawtucket Boulevard. The T-Mobile one, you brought it up, so I'm gonna, what happened last time is it got denied through the board, and what the engineers were able to do was bring it to court and prove that there was a need, and that's why it got overruled, and you had no choice in the matter. The people who live there were not saying anything about the need. We don't want to get tricked into that like we did the last time. Our problem right now is it's hooked to the facade. It looks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, you could hang it on the roof, you could put it down. We don't even know how many tiers there are gonna be of these things. Right now, I think they're putting up 5 antennas of some sort, so that's 5 more hooked onto the building. Just because one guy did it wrong doesn't mean they have to do it wrong also. If you do end up granting this, I'd like to see if you could put a condition on it that they put up a cash bond for the removal of the equipment, because when this stuff, everybody knows it becomes obsolete by the time they're finished putting it up. And I think we're going to get stuck with having to remove it later and, fix it up. What do we do? Take a saw, cut it off, let it hit the parking lot? Because when their rental agreements run out, they're just going to pack up and leave, and we're going to be stuck with the equipment. That's one of the things. The other thing is they have it down as 525 Pawtucket Boulevard, and they're really putting it on 527. So I'm just kind of concerned if a 5 going on both of them, or just they happen to have the wrong address. And you'll notice, because I think in the last meeting, 2 meetings ago, a gentleman said he put in the wrong address. So it'll be on the 527, not 525. I don't know if that has to be resubmitted or whatever. But again, that restriction, a condition, and it not one of the bonds where they don't make the payment and it goes away. Something that's, put the money up, put them on top of the building, and at least we have the dough to get rid of it after.
Yeah, I just, my initial thought is a good idea, but I don't know that I think that may be beyond the scope of the authority of this board to order a cash bond. I don't even know how it would be, obviously the board doesn't hold that kind of bond or money, and I'm not sure that the city is set up to do it, but maybe the applicant has a suggestion as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's just something, because, these guys are gonna be gone in a couple of years because the equipment's no good. And, we're going to be stuck with it. And I know the trustees in Princeton Property, they're pretty much taking care of themselves on this, and they're not dealing with any of the owners. This is the only communication we know about this, is coming here to hear what they have to say. There are 35 owners besides Princeton Property, and, they ought to be able to contact us, too, when things happen like this. I mean, right now, there's probably out of 35, there's 30 of them are all senior citizens. I mean, and I think you've seen the last time, a lot of them had trouble even coming here. So that was a couple of my points I want to make.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition of this petition? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Sir, I'd like to give you an opportunity to address his concerns if you'd like to.
What is pretty common for wireless communication facilities is a board conditions any approval upon posting of a removal bond, and that's customary, and my client would agree to post a removal bond for their equipment on the rooftop.
Okay.
And then in the event that they no longer use that or it's abandoned, there would be the funds that the facility could be removed. In terms of the aesthetic concerns that the owners have, we're willing to work with the owners on it, but basically the goal was to design that part so that it would replicate what T-Mobile has at the site. T-Mobile has a facility at the site. To our knowledge, there's been no complaints about the facility in terms of its aesthetics or how it looks. So in terms of how the facility would be designed, it would be designed similar to the T-Mobile facility in terms of mounting and having it go over the side, because that is what's allowed in the master deed in terms of what they're allowed to do in terms of their roof rights. But it would be painted to match. Similarly, the cylinders would be painted to match. I mean, it would be tried to design it to have a minimal intrusive aspect on the neighbors. The reality is they have a significant gap in coverage, and they're trying to find an existing building that they can use to close it instead of proposing either a new raw land or a new tower facility or something that would have more of an impact on the community at large.
Well, what about, regardless of what the master deed says, is it possible for you to do a roof-mounted and just leave it on the roof and actually not add to that? Can you do your own? I mean, that would...
I think
that wouldn't tie you into what T-Mobile apparently has done and doesn't look good, and you'd have your own. And I think with that condition, it's something that I'd be willing to support.
I mean, we can certainly look into it. I mean, I think there's only one sector that has it coming off the side, and I think that's because that's where the sloping is. It's not flat on that side, so the only way to propagate the signal is to have it come off the roof and down down towards the facade and propagate in that direction. Unlike the other areas where it's flat on that part of the roof, they did install just traditional roof-mounted facilities where there are cylinders extending up from the roof. But, I mean, when you look at the plans on the roof plan, it looks like that's a slope side of the roof and that they can't just attach something to the roof in that area. If they install it behind that, you'd have to extend it above that pitch roof. So you'd have clear line of sight to your neighboring sites. And that just wouldn't look like a natural architectural structure. It would be too tall.
So when the gentleman's point, are you going to add more of these boxes to the side, or is it going within that box?
No, it's the cylinders are mounted to the roof, and what's shown on the plans would be those antennas and those dishes going within those cylinders. There would just be one antenna that's extending over the roof and towards the facade. So that's actually on the A4 drawing, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I'm sorry, were these submitted with the application?
yeah, we don't have the color copies, but
So if you look on the very first page, what you have is, you'll see an antenna to the right. That's the existing T-Mobile antenna. What you have to the left would be the proposed antenna, and this is the one that would be extending off and over the roof. But it can't go on top of the roof because that's where the pitch is for that particular, where the roof is. If you turn to the second page, you see this is the existing site location. You can see T-Mobile's canister right in the middle. And do you have an extra one? Yeah, sure. I apologize, is it okay if I...
yeah.
So, this is T-Mobile. That would be the proposed. The second sheet is the canister. You can see the white canister. That's T-Mobile's equipment within it. And those would be the canisters that would house the proposed equipment for the site.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
next question. The existing equipment, to Mr. Mercier's point, is this currently on the rear or the building that's set in front?
At the rear, that's my answer.
I think, just to clarify, Bill, like the on our agenda thing, it says 525, but I think everything else we have does say 527.
Yes, I've checked it out, Mr. Chairman. Nearly everything else has the proper address, yes.
And do you have anything proven that it's 527? Did we discuss this?
Yes, and the lease is definitely for 527. The issue was, the reason why it came up as 525 is when requesting the certified abutters list from the assessor's office, in order to pull the abutters, the assessor said that they could only use 525 to pull the abutters. I'm not sure as to the reason why, but you can also see on the actual abutters list request that I had written in 527, and then 525 was written in above it. So the abutters list was pulled for 525.
Okay.
But the current equipment is the rear building at 527, correct? And you have to co-locate your equipment on the same building? That's what you're proposing, right?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, anything else, sir?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You know, my feeling on this is that it's a special permit, and I think that we've pretty much examined all the issues that we can. To me, it's not going to have a detriment to the surrounding neighborhood or the way it exists right now, and it's really not adding much to it. I understand that the neighbors aren't happy about it, and they weren't happy about T-Mobile, but I don't think that it's going to be much more of a eyesore or anything than it is right now. I don't think it's going to add to any detriment whatsoever. The issue with the bond that he brought up and the address, I think, is something that we can impose as a condition, that ensure that you properly applied at 527, and that you post a removal bond with the city. And to me, I think that would satisfy everything I need for this. It's the rear building, and the pictures don't appear to be completely, the pictures that I see, I don't think you're adding much to it, and that's what they're saying, and I don't see how it can be any worse than it is right now, if you want to say it's bad. So that's just my feeling. But Bill, anything?
Yeah, a couple other things, Mr. Chairman. Again, to Mr. Mercier's point about obsolete equipment, what's the expectation around how long the equipment, in other words, I'm sure technology changes. Do you tend to increase the structural content of that equipment? Does it pretty much stay the same?
Excuse me. Based on the leasing rights that we have with Princeton Grandview, the leasing rights are finite. What we're installing right now is what we would be able to install. We would have to go through an entire new leasing process in order to get additional rights. Further, typically with the antennas that you would see, if new technology came out, it would be very similar style panel antennas. But in terms of installing additional antennas, this site doesn't lend itself to that, based on the design of the rooftop and where we're already locating.
So if you had to do a change out of equipment, what type of notification is given to the association, if any?
We would notify Princeton Grandview Association, and any type of, modification would be subject to their consent.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, looking down the road, say another applicant comes in here, what does this board have, what can this board do to, keep the number of units like this at a minimum? Is there anything this board can do going down the road?
When you mean units, you mean number of,
Well, if we grant this one, and somebody else comes along, I'm just thinking about the building itself. How many more units could be put on these existing buildings?
I don't know that there's a limit to it. It's definitely within our authority to decide whether or not this one or any other subsequent petition be allowed to put anything on there, and I think that so long as we, explore the issue of an alternative viable site,
Yep.
I agree that if they're gonna start, this is one high building, there's not many there, and they're gonna basically plaster this building with these, units. It's ultimately not gonna look good for the building, but as everybody knows, we take everything here on a case-by-case basis. We really can't base the next petition on what we did on this one, or this petition on what we may do on a future one, so, everybody has a right to a fair
Right.
petition,
Yeah,
so.
and this isn't directed at Clear Wireless. I'm just asking the question because I can imagine down the road, the same residents would be here again asking the same questions. Could we have a condition, if it's granted, that if there's going to be any change out of equipment, that the association is notified?
I just wrote that down as one, so, yeah, if everybody votes on that, I think we can.
Could you also add the owners? Because the association and the owners There is no association. There's Princeton
Well, I
Properties.
think that was brought up before, wasn't it?
Yeah,
when-
Princeton Properties, the trustee, and there are still 35 owners. They don't correspond with us at all, pretty much. So
I
we
wrote
don't-
down notify unit owners.
Add that, if you could add that, if whatever you're gonna be doing, because just telling Princeton doesn't mean the owners are gonna know.
Right, right.
Okay. And we're going to change, is it going to be 527?
We'll just make a condition that if this is approved, make a condition that the applicant prove that this is, prove to us that this was applied for as 527 and not 525, which should be simple. It appears to be the case.
That's all I have,
So,
Mr. Chairman.
okay.
Thank you.
Jack, anything?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just so that the owners who are present, and you can impart this to the others, that it's an issue of concern as we look down the road. Unfortunately, historically, in my tenure on the board, what we found is even when we feel as though we've acted in the best interest of the tenants or the butters, or those that we feel are directly affected by the coverage or the installation of this equipment, every time that we have denied, it's been overruled, and the FCC has complete authority to make that jurisdiction. So currently, the way things stand, and Mr. Chairman, please correct me if I'm wrong, unless something is done at a much higher level above us, all we're going to do is basically delay the process. We can vote to deny, but the way things currently stand as far as the federal communications are concerned, they've overruled us every time that we've denied.
Well, that was true on this one petition for Clear Wireless, for T-Mobile. I'm not so sure it's the same with Clear Wireless. In fact, I think that there's, if somebody voted to deny this, I'm not positive it would be overturned. So you can vote however you want. I think that if, we've asked the questions that we need to ask. I think if they can demonstrate that we denied it without considering that there was no viable alternative, then they may have more of a case. But, there are several avenues that the people who are prejudiced by this can explore. That's not our job, but they can definitely, they have all their rights reserved to appeal, even if we approve this. So, and I'm not so sure that they wouldn't prevail on appeal either. It's, there's, I guess the answer is not for us. We approve or deny, and whatever happens, happens. Anything else, Chuck?
No, sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have heard these petitions a couple of times. We've been back and forth before us. We asked you to do a couple of things, which is try to locate other site. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I feel that this petitioner has exhausted the search. He has been trying very hard to find other locations, and it doesn't appear that other tall building in the areas that meet the need for this petitioner. In addition, that I noticed that this petitioner is very, very willing to try to work with the owners, even willing on a last-minute notice to put cash removal bond as a condition, which we had other telecommunication before us in the past have not done so. Therefore, I feel that they have earned my vote tonight in approving this. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a mixed opinion on this one, to be honest with you. In a sense, Clear Wireless, didn't show to me that they did their full due diligence. I mean, they did miss the Maycom building, which is a very short distance up the street, and would be a perfect location for this, okay? And that's how I feel in that sense. But on the flip side, the residents, we already denied one years ago. Again, it was reversed by a higher authority. And in protection of the residents, they seem to have learned to live with this. So I don't want that to happen again, because what happens, and to Mr. Mercia, if we deny this or it does get denied, it gets reversed by a higher authority, then we have no control. We can't put conditions on it like the removal bond and stuff like this. So for the sake of the residents, I mean, this is something I'm not crazy about. I'm really not. But I just don't want it to get reversed by higher authority, get approved there, and we have no control over it. But for right now, if we approve this, we can put some conditions on it that they have to abide by. So for that reason, I'm going to support the special permit, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Rick?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I guess if the board's votes in favor of the conditions that we're talking about is the first one, that the applicant be required to post a removal bond with the city of Lowell prior to the installation of any equipment, and the second one is to notify the unit owners of any change in the equipment. The third one would be to confirm that this is 527 Pawtucket Boulevard and not 525. So, I need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve that the petitioner posts a cash removal bond with the city of Lowell prior to the installation of all this unit. Second, that the petitioners is to notify the unit owners of any change. And third, that is the petitioner is to, what's that, Mr. Chairman?
Prove that it's the applicant is at 525.
To confirm that the address is 820.
527.
Yeah, 527, not 525. Thank you.
Seconded.
Roll call, Corey?
Mr. Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
I will vote to approve with conditions. Mr. Geary?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Knox?
Approved with conditions.
Mr. Nguyen?
Approve with condition.
Okay, you've been approved with 5 votes. You may come on up and
So have him sign.
Thank you, and have a nice holiday.
Thank you.
thank you for coming.
Okay, if you can just sign, you know what, just sign that one, just so we have some document, and we just leave with Corey, you can put it in there. You go to the conditions, Corey?
Good luck.
Okay, the next petition is the first order of new business, ZB 2009, number 54. Special permit and variance for signs. This is Lee Milt S. Petroleum, Inc., care of Getty Petroleum Marketing, Inc. The property address is 319 Chelmsford Street. This is a neighborhood business district. To erect a freestanding moving internally illuminated sign with a surface area greater than 30 square feet and internally illuminated canopy signage for a gasoline fueling station pursuant to section 6.3 of the zoning ordinance. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is David Kelly with Core States, representing Lee Mill Oil. Basically, what we are proposing to do is to rebrand this site from a Getty station into a BP station. As such, the associated colors and signage are going to be upgraded. What we are looking to do is take the existing Getty pylon sign and the pricer that is located below it and replace it with a new rectangular, square-shaped BP pylon head and a LED digital display for the gas prices. The size of the proposed pylon head is actually 14.5 square feet smaller than what is there now. It does exceed the 30 square feet, but again, it is smaller than what's there now, making it more conforming. The size of the pricer remains the same. They'll just use the same box and then just change the internal workings of it out and put a new panel in the front. When this sign illuminates at night, the only portion that illuminates is the actual helios itself. The background remains black, so you don't have a big box that glows. You just have a green, yellow, and white helios that illuminates. With the pricer, since it is digital pricing, the only portion of that panel that illuminates is the actual numbers of the pricing, as opposed to the whole box illuminating and having white light coming through and filtering through the area. With the canopy, we would be removing the red fascia, the yellow stripe, and the Getty logo, and painting the fascia a pearl color. As currently proposed, we were going to put a three-dimensional bullnose along the canopy with an LED strip around it that would glow during the business hours. However, based on input from the design planner, Ms. Rachel Kisker, we, instead of putting on the 3D bullnose, we are just going to put a sticker across the canopy. It still has the same appearance when you're driving by it as the 3D bullnose, but at night it doesn't illuminate, it's just black. In addition to that, we are going to be installing 3 helios internally illuminated, very similar to the one that is on the pylon sign. It's 3-foot diameter. Again, all the glows from that is the green, yellow, white, as opposed to a big box. It's just a nice little circle. On the building, we will be removing the red fascia, painting it green, putting a little bright green band at the bottom of it, just to kind of give it a little two-tone look, and installing 2 stickers, non-internally illuminated, one that says service, one that says shop. Both those signs, again, are smaller than what's already on the Getty building. So all in all, on the site, we will be reducing the total area of the signage by 14.7 square feet. And that is basically the proposal.
Okay, and you did get an opportunity to review Rachel's recommendations to this board? So if we take them one at a time, she's recommending the illuminated sign displaying the gas prices only, which will fall under a separate section in the new sign code being developed. That's acceptable to you?
Yes, that is the way the sign works. If we had gone with the older style, where you have the plastic numbers on the panel, then the whole panel would glow at night. And
Okay. And then she's recommending denial of the following, that the LED illuminated strip on the canopy should be removed. Because it will have a negative impact on the neighborhood and adjacent residents, especially since it's a 24-hour business. The light will be a constant intrusion. I think you addressed that by saying you're going to have a sticker.
yes, I actually have a sample of it, if you just wanted to see it.
Sure.
Just a little cut. Basically, it just looks like that. So at night, it's black. You don't see it.
Okay, and that sounds like a good alternative. And then Rachel had recommended while doing this, it might be a good time to consider the parking lot in front of the building it's wide, it has no curb cuts, and really doesn't address the proper landscaping and other issues regarding safety that might be related to the property, painting of the lines and signs and...
Unfortunately, this application is for the signage, not really for anything site-related. I can pass that information on to the owner, and what I can tell you is that on most of these sites, they will reseal the parking lots. Since they're repainting the buildings, putting on the new signage, they'll reseal to make it look nice. If they're going to do that, if there are any lines out there, I can't promise, but chances are they'll put some new striping out there.
Okay, so that could be a condition, and then, I know you can't answer for them because you're not here for that, but we can put possibly a condition in that you will convey to the owners that we would like them to do that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody on the board? Bill? Jack? Vesna?
Mr. Chairman, the third condition, or the third line that you read from the recommendation from the DPD, can we just make a condition, a condition of approval? Not that this petitioner is going before the owner and tell the owners to do this, but make it a condition of approving this sign tonight is that you have to do that. Clean up the lot, that's what we mean.
Right, we can put any reasonable condition on.
This is a request for variance and special permits on signing for the property.
Right.
And
I am very much understand that.
yeah, and I understand what you're saying and what she's saying as well. I mean, if you wanted to draft a memo directly to them and just say, we had discussions at last night's hearing, and in review of the signage, I would like to see the striping redone, and just send it directly to them.
Yeah, I think, and maybe I could ask Rachel, could I?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm
Welcome.
Rachel. Thank you. I'm Rachel Kisker, new design planner with the City of Lowell, and I wrote the memo that you're referring to. And George and I were just chatting over there, and he said that another way to approach it would be have a condition that the owner is to meet with us directly, and it sort of does the same thing as you're saying, whether it's and we draft a memo together, or however we take it from there, but that would be a good way to kind of convey our thoughts directly to them.
Right, I think that actually streamlines it. It might be better because there may be reasons he can't do things like that, so I don't want to put a condition on there that he can't comply with, and then he has to come back.
And as I said in the memo, those were, suggestions, and I understand that it's not, his job to figure out the line striping in the lot, but it might be a good time to do so.
Right, it's not fair for this poor guy. He's
Right.
gonna come in here for that.
So,
So that's something you would agree to meet with the owner, and then you could address those issues with him. We could make a condition that the owner agree to meet with you before any change in signage is made.
yes, that would be great.
Go ahead, Bob.
We could also add to that prior to issuing a permit to install the signage, that we get approval from DPD and these folks here, that the applicant has met their conditions. So they can
Right.
confirm.
Before the permit's issued.
Prior to, yes.
Okay, yeah, they can all be done in one meeting, I would presume,
Yes.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah, that's actually easier, because then we don't have to incorporate these, and we can incorporate these, and then they can, if there's a reason to change something, then, the only thing is, I hate to leave it wide open where the applicant is here now, and then you add extra conditions that aren't discussed here tonight, because those aren't conditions we're imposing, those are conditions you're imposing, and I don't think that's something we can do. So, maybe the best way to do it is to, if the board decides to ultimately approve this petition, we do so that he makes the changes as you recommended in this correspondence, and then additionally, that he meets with the planning department within 14 days.
okay,
Or sets up, starts the meeting within
Right,
14
right.
days as to discuss aesthetic issues with the parking lot. I think that's the fair thing to do, but depends what everybody else thinks.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir, do you have something you want to add?
thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
The only concern I see with something along this lines is now you potentially start raising site plan issues, where if they just restripe whatever's out there, and then somebody says, well, now there's 4 parking spaces, but per zoning and per planning requirements, you need 8. So now we tripped into having to redo a site plan and then go into a whole nother realm, just because we're restriping what's there.
I think we have the guy to answer that question. George, you want to?
If we reach the point where it's the purview of the board to approve this tonight, and it is the purview of the board to approve this, and if they wish to do so, and they wish to do so with a condition to try to address this stuff, I think we would commit to the idea that any suggestions, or I don't know if they're quite depending upon how the wording of the condition, whether there's suggestions or requirements placed upon the landowner, would not rise to the level of pursuing a review of site plan approval again, because basically what we would need to do is make sure that we're not changing more than 14 parking spaces, changing more than 4, we'll pledge that anything we suggest doing would be kept below the purview of reopening yet another board hearing with yet another board. Because
Okay.
this really is, what we're trying to do is say that if you're addressing the neighborhood character issue of signs, and there's an opportunity to use that to address some other character issues around the perimeter of it, if we can do that together, that's great, but I certainly don't want to open up making this much more complicated.
Right, and
than
that's how I read it.
It potentially is.
More as a
But
suggestion.
it really depends. If you want to request put a condition of a meeting, then it's really up to you whether you condition that on them needing to implement everything in that meeting, or just having that be sort of a cooperative discussion we have, or to what level. It's tough to implement conditions that you don't know what they are to some
Right.
extent, so I don't know quite.
Especially when we don't know what they are. We can't approve a condition we don't know what it's going to be.
Right, but even if you reach the point where it's a matter of the condition is just that we have the discussion about it and see if we can come to some mutual agreement on something, that would put no pressure on them at all, but it would still require the opportunity for us to sit down. Because if they are restriping, we might just have a chance to
Right.
sort of get a chance to just
Okay,
help
I
fix
think
something.
that's probably reasonable. Does that satisfy
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
If you would like something stronger, I think the only other answer is to continue it and hold the try to hold the meeting between now and January. But if everything else is in place, you probably don't want.
Right, and we're
So-
getting kind of backed up and
All right.
continuing.
I know you are, and I know you don't want to continue any more sign cases.
All right.
So-
All right, thanks, George.
Those are all.
All right, Corey?
Okay, yeah, first of all, I do support your upgrades. I go by that station quite a lot. It's a very busy station, and it was been very dilapidated for a while. This is overdue, but nonetheless, you're here now, and I am satisfied with the upgrades and the signage, and it was a good alternative to the Rachel's recommendation about the LED sign. You're converting to stickers, I believe?
Around the canopy.
You're on the canopy,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, that's a great alternative. And, we don't want to bond you to a big site plan here, but we just would like to see a little parking lot improvements here, too, because it could use it in that department as well. So I do support the petition, Mr. Chairman, but what's the proper language you would like to use for the condition, I ask, if this were to get approved?
Well, I think that what we would do is, as far as that issue, I would just put a condition in that the applicant agree to meet with Rachel Kiska within 14 days of the approval to discuss possible improvements to the site, and that's it. The applicant, to make it clear, is not required to agree to do that, just required to meet and have that discussion. I don't think it's really fair to, or even legal to impose conditions on the site when we're talking about a sign. I guess it's kind of...
We're looking for a discussion to take place, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
That's all right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Rick?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I know the site pretty well over there. I'd like them to sit down and talk to Rachel and George Koroikis about cleaning the site up. I mean, he does own that whole site. He owns the whole corner from one side to the other. You got, cars parked over there, buildings falling down. I mean, they're looking for a variance and a special permit. They're looking for help from us. We're looking for a little help from him to clean it up, make it look better for the neighborhood over there. There's been a lot of work going on over there with the new school. It's been there for a while. And I'd like to see it cleaned up a little bit. You're asking for a variance, and again, I know they're going to rebrand themselves, and hopefully it'll help them do better business over there, being a BP. So I'd like them to sit down. I wouldn't mind a continuance to see what they're going to do for us, the city, and making that place a little bit neater and cleaner.
Well, I can tell you when they come in here and they repaint the building, put up the signage, any like random trash and debris and any random buckets that might be around, they do try and pick up most of that stuff, but ultimately it's still the same end user, the same owner still owning it at the end of the day. And I mean, that becomes an issue really becomes an enforcement issue from either a zoning or like a variance issue almost on use of the property if he's doing things that he's not supposed to, which is, again, not part of this application. Unfortunately.
Again, I know you're the representative. I mean, places, in need of some work. We'd like to see something done. I don't know if there's any neighbors here to speak on this, but I'd like to hear from them if they are, and I'll have some more comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anybody here wish to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anybody here wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition to this petition? And hearing none, that portion, the public hearing is closed. So we'll open up to the board for any further discussion. My feeling is that if we approve it with the conditions that are pretty significant that were made by Rachel Kiska, and he agrees to these, and then agrees to have the owners meet with the planning department prior to the installation of the sign, at least those issues can be addressed there. And I don't know that there's much more that we can put on as a reasonable condition. But I agree with Rick. If it's really, I don't know why they do all this changing sign and leave the place looking like it does. Wouldn't make much sense to me, so I'm kind of going on faith that the guy's going to do the right thing.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Bill.
When the application was filled out, Mr. Kelly signed it?
Yes.
Project manager? I don't have my glasses on tonight, but is that Mr. Kelly? Project,
Yes.
Do you know who he is?
That is me.
Okay. So when in the application, you explain here about proposed alterations, and you talk about how the area is going to be, I mean, for instance, you mentioned about all the refacing and painting, and which I think everybody on the board is looking for. Then you have other miscellaneous site features.
Oh, that's like the vent pipes for the underground storage tanks. Those all get painted the pearl color.
But in your application, pretty much, you were here for a special permit, a variance for the signage, which is why you're here, but you also added this, which I think is great. So I don't think there should be any issue with if DPD wants to sit with the owners and kind of talk about the site in general. I know you're here for the signs, but since that's been added to the application, I don't see where it's out of bounds for DPD or a condition to be put on for this petition that DPD do sit with the owners. So I think by adding it, I think it's great, because I think we all agree that it needs an overhaul, that area.
Well, just so you can understand what I was saying with that, with paint the building and other miscellaneous features, it's saying we're painting like the vent pipes, painting the bollards,
Sure.
painting the concrete islands,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. But when I say other miscellaneous site features, you know, that might tell me they're gonna do the parking lot, that might tell me they're gonna do some other things. It doesn't say that, but I think to the chairman's point and to a couple of the members, you know, DPD, I think, is bringing up some areas here that we've talked about before with this particular site, so I fully endorse the condition. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and just so everybody knows, if anybody wants to put a specific detailed condition on there regarding, you know, cleaning up, we're here to discuss it as a board. That might be something that, you know, the majority of the board goes for, despite whether the applicant agrees to do it or not. If he wants to get approvals, he may have to. So that's something to discuss. I mean,
Fill out the application.
it's kind of a gray area, because you do put in your application that, you know, it's pretty much to clean the place up, make it better, and,
I mean, maybe some sort of condition where the owner agrees to meet with, you know, members of the board and the design board to discuss cleanup of the site and other site
we
concerns.
could put and follow the recommendations of DPD, so long as they don't rise to the level of
Yeah,
having
that's
to appear
the
before another
concern,
board.
as long as we're not
All right,
being
so
pulled back into going to permitting for anything else.
that should do it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the last time they were in front of us, there was some neighbors, obviously, the buildings with the holes in the roofs, and I'll pose this question to Bob. I mean, that's what the neighbors were having a hard time with. There was a couple neighbors up on the upper part of the street that said, you know, we're sick of looking at the holes in the roofs, and the buildings were supposed to be torn down at one time. Those garages there, I mean, I'm looking to clean it up. You know, this is the time I feel that we should ask the gentleman to take care of his property.
Well, basically, the building code's pretty specific in that we're not allowed to issue a building permit against any site that has an outstanding violation. So based on the conversation tonight, I'll be taking a look at the file to see if there are any outstanding violations. And we could issue that permit, in this case to put up the sign, but would also have to include removing those violations. So without looking at the file in front of me, that's the approach I'll be taking at this point.
So,
And it may very well include those buildings.
That is pretty typical that we've seen in other communities in going through this project. That, you know, there have been sites where they've had violations in the past that basically were never addressed, and when they applied for the permit to do this work, then that has to get pulled up.
now's a good time to do that. So, you know, and just to make sure that happens, we could put another condition on that they prove that they've complied with all the building code, and if not, to rectify anything prior to installing any new sign.
Essentially, the permitting process, and this is a good example, that it is self-regulating.
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't be issuing variances, permits, or building permits against properties that are in violation, whether it's
But how would
minor
we
or
know?
major.
How would we know as a board that there's a violation?
That would just simply take manpower to go through the file and visit the site and do a history check on the property.
Okay.
Using this as an example, and again, without trying to trigger anything that's going to make other reviews, planning board, et cetera, a simple process is just to look through the file, see if there are any outstanding violations. If there are, those would have to be corrected prior to issuing a permit for the putting up the sign.
Okay, I think with all those conditions, we pretty much can clean this place up.
Yeah, that's,
Everybody, go ahead, Jack.
The commissioner just brought up a great point. I'm wondering, to DP, is that something that could be instituted as part of policy, either through the building commission or the codes, that before we issue signage, we have to make sure that the properties are up to code? Is that a statute already in place?
No, that's already in place under the...
So then it's just a matter of...
under the building, the state building code. We want to take it a little bit further and fine tune it and bring it to home. We shouldn't be issuing permits or approval, I say we, but this board shouldn't be issuing permits for a business to put up a sign if the business is not in compliance. It has 6 or 7 other signs that are there that shouldn't be there, which is a problem in some of the areas of the city. We try to, manpower won't allow us to do it, but what we try to do is visit these sites and make sure, in general, the property that's coming before this board is
So
relatively
in an ideal
compliant.
setting, that's an issue that would be addressed before the petitioner came to us.
Yes, to see if there are anything outstanding there that needs to be corrected prior to. And it can be addressed the night of the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
So, I guess that leaves us with the conditions we've been discussing. The first one, that you incorporate the recommendations as set forth in Rachel Kisker's correspondence, December 14, 2009, that the owner agree to meet with the Department of Planning and Development with regards to cleaning up the site and incorporating their suggestions, so long as those suggestions do not rise to the level of having to go before the planning board. And that the applicant agree to rectify any code violations prior to beginning the installation of any new signs.
Right, well, a building permit would be able to be issued if there were,
Right, I know, but I just want to put that as a safeguard, so it's there as a condition. And I think that's what we discussed. Does anybody have anything to add to that, or any other? You need a minute, Bob? Okay. All right, so no further discussion? Need a motion?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve with the following conditions. That the applicant adhere by the recommendations set forth by Planning and Development in a memo dated December 14th, 2009. Secondly, property owner agreed to meet with DPD regarding possible site improvements 14 days, prior to 14 days after approval. Mr. Chairman, is that the right language?
Yep, and adhere by their recommendations so long as it doesn't arise to the level of having to apply before the planning board.
Okay, and to adhere by their recommendations as long as it doesn't need planning board approvals. Okay. Applicant agreed to rectify any and all building code violations prior to installation.
Okay.
Does that cover?
Yeah, we need a second.
Second.
And roll call, Corey?
Mr. Bailey?
Approve with conditions.
I vote to approve with conditions. Mr. Geary?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Knox?
Approve with conditions.
Mr. Noon?
Approve with condition.
Okay, so you've been unanimously approved with the conditions as we just set forth. I just need you to come up and sign and date this memorandum by Rachel, and you can leave it with Corey, and then I'll call your next case.
Steve, I'll touch this with it too. Okay, great. Congratulations.
Okay, the next petition is ZB 2009-55, also request for special permanent variance. Signs, James Zagoras, care of Getty Petroleum Marketing, Inc., 274 High Street, to erect a freestanding move-in internally illuminated sign with a surface area greater than 30 square feet and to internally illuminate canopy signage for a gasoline fueling station pursuant to section 6.3 of the zoning code. And so you've also received the correspondence regarding this petition as well. It was on the second page. And tell us a little bit about this application.
again, David Kelly with Core States. Same protocols on the previous site. We're going to be replacing the Getty pylon heads with BP pylon heads, replacing the pricer with an LED pricer, Same treatment across the fascia of the building, only this building is receiving one sign, not two. Same treatment along the canopy with the three-dimensional LED bullnose. All in all, the entire site has a reduction of 21 square feet, or 22 square feet, give or take, in signage area. In response to her memo, the first two recommendations of approval, we concur with that. With the comment to her denying of the second pylon sign, and speaking with others prior to this hearing, instead of doing a 35 square foot pylon head on the secondary sign, we do have a smaller sign, which is only 19 square feet. It's the same shape and orientation and scale, but this way it's smaller, and it'll incur even a further reduction in the site by another 11 square feet, and it'll still show consistency across the site. Regarding the LED on the canopy, again, we will remove the three-dimensional LED bullnose and put on the sticker on the fascia instead, thus addressing her second issue of denial. And then with regards to her recommendation for improvement, I'm just going to simply leave it as the second condition of approval for the prior site and just bypass that entire discussion since it's going to be the exact same.
Okay. All right. So, that makes it easy. All right, so
basically, we're reducing the square footage of the signage by about 32 square feet, and we will make adjustments to the plans to address her two reasons for denial.
okay, so you'll incorporate the recommendations as set forth in this memorandum regarding that petition, and you'll agree to adopt the recommendations after a meeting with DPD regarding the landscaping issues around the building, and do that prior to any installations, and also with the code violations as well. Okay, anybody here wishing to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anybody here wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition to this petition? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Any discussion? None? Okay, I think we're talking about the same conditions, Corey, so I need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve with the following conditions. That the petitioner adhere by the recommendations set forth by Planning and Development in a memo dated December 14th, 2009. And the property owner agreed to meet with DPD regarding possible site improvements, to not to the extent where it would require planning board approval.
And the code violations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Sure.
George just reminded me to add that we agree with and appreciate the change to the 19 square feet sign for the second location.
Okay.
And
And that's what you said, 19 square feet,
I
okay?
believe so, yeah, and we find that acceptable.
Great, thanks, Rachel.
Okay, and a third condition, Mr. Chairman, that the applicant agree to rectify any and all building code violations prior to installation.
Okay, and just to clarify, what the comment was that he agreed to with the 19 square foot sign. Okay. All right, so I need a second. And roll call.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead, Bob.
I think on the phrase that you use, I think it's kind of critical, and Rick, if you want to weigh in on this, please do. With regards to outstanding any code violations, the phrase I used, and I think that's the language out of the state code, is that any documented or confirmed outstanding violation. We're not going there to look for any. We're looking for documented violations that have not been corrected.
It might be already in place.
Yeah, that we have on file.
Correct.
I mean, if there's any safety issues or something, but we're not there to go and
inspect.
go through the property with a fine-tooth comb. They need to know that. That's not the purpose.
Correct. It's just to see anything that's
If there's
already
any
on.
outstanding violations, and I believe that, Rick, that's exactly what the code says, are pretty darn close.
That's correct.
If there are any outstanding violations, we're required not to issue a building permit. We're not, it doesn't say we're to go through the whole facility or the structure or everything and look for everything. That's not the purpose of that. So just for clarification purposes, the phrase should be any uncorrected, outstanding documented violations. that are on file.
Yes, I changed the language, Mr. Commissioner, that's some great input, because one could mean previous violations, and the other could mean an inspection, a thorough inspection, and that's certainly not the case here.
Thank you both very much.
Yep.
Okay. So, we'll start over with a roll call.
Mr. Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
I vote to approve with conditions. Mr. Geary?
Approve with conditions?
Mr. Knox?
Approved with conditions.
Mr. Noon?
Approve with condition.
Okay, so you've been unanimously approved. If you can come up and sign the second page of that. And just make sure you convey to the owner to coordinate a meeting with Department of Planning and Development. Thank you. Okay, the next petition is ZB 2009, number 56, a request for variance. David Daly, care of Daly Realty Trust, 135 Beacon Street, to allow the stack parking at a two-family residential structure in accordance with 6.1.4 of the zoning ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, before we go any further, I think Mr. Bienvenu wants to recuse himself.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself from this.
Okay, so let the record reflect that Mr. Bienvenu has recused himself from this petition. Daly.
My name is David Daly. I'm the principal of Daly Realty Trust and Daly General Contracting. We'll be building this project located at 135 Beacon Street. I purchased this property last May and subsequently divided into 3 Form A buildable lots. Since then, I went to we fixed up the existing property. It was an older late 1800s, 1900s, I don't know the exact time frame, old mansard on the property. It is currently under agreement to be sold, but we brought it back to life and put a lot of time, energy, and money into it, and it really came out nice. So there's technically now 3 lots on the property. We subdivided and made, as I indicated, 3 Form A lots. We have a Form A single family and a duplex, and by right, we have the right to build a single family and a duplex. This triggered planning board review under a special permit under neighborhood character review. I went to the board in first meeting, I think was October 5th, the planning board. Obviously, the building sat there on a 28,000 square foot lot for, probably over 100 years. And there was an attached building to it that we removed, and so there was some opposition to the project. I agreed to meet with the neighbors, and I did so subsequently, meeting with the neighbors twice, once formally and second time to kind of walk the property and show them the existing 2-family, what I had done to the property. It went really well, actually. We had some really good dialogue. Not only did we agree on most of the things, but we were able to agree on one of their major requests, and that was to change totally change the style and character of the 2-family. There was some pushback from the neighbors about the size of the duplex, so we went ahead and changed totally changed the architecture of it. I went to planning board. It's got a couple weeks now, the second time around, and received some really favorable reviews at the beginning of the process from both the neighbors and from the planning board members. This is the second time around. And I'm not speaking out of turn here for the planning board, but it seemed like they were probably going to approve the plan that night. One of the planning board members requested just some feedback from Aaron from the DPD, who noted a zoning issue with the parking. Without going into too much detail, and it's really an issue I'm going to take up with the DPD, is the fact that the current zoning regulations, and it's kind of ironic the fact that I'm going before the neighborhood character review, and everyone on that street, I took pictures. I didn't. You can drive up there yourself, and I didn't get a chance. I went to the Walmart at Target today, and everyone was getting their Christmas pictures so I didn't have the time. But what I did was just to kind of show what the real problem here is, not the fact that there's a zoning problem, but I think that the zoning regulation has to be amended. And I support that by the fact that I'm going before you guys to get a variance on a Form A lot for a project that is supported by most of the neighbors. I have a letter in that packet from the association. I met with I did the right thing. I met with the abutters, and I'm going before them for a variance that meets the character of the neighborhood. I propose putting parking in the front to the side of the duplex, like each and every other duplex or single family in that neighborhood. And I have a picture from every one of them. Basically, the zoning right now, the way it reads, basically dictates that I put a driveway up the middle of the property and a huge parking lot in the back, not only killing open space and green space, but also for the gentleman across the street, or the neighbors, who have to endure the headlights coming into their front window every night or every morning, early morning when they exit. So what we did was, like I said, and maybe George, this might not be the forum to discuss it, is to address the issue with what I'm before you tonight. And I'll tell you what, it's been very frustrating, I had to be honest with you. This is the third time in front of, sitting at this podium. I've done what I consider to be the right thing, and I'm kind of handcuffed. I lost a $300 sale on the single family as a result, because it kind of held up, the single family was kind of caught up in this whole process. So obviously I'm here to look for a variance for this stacked parking that was triggered in a zoning change probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I look for you to ask me any questions you like, but there's some procedural things I'd like to request from the board too, but I guess
Right, I guess the, just so you know, the engineer's office sent just a 2-line memo. The driveway design has not been approved, well, probably because you don't have approval from this board, is that, I don't know, did you get a?
She basically, we had proposed putting, it's really, what we're doing is some green concepts up there, and I went more into detail with it with the planning board. But what I have here is a letter. I don't know if did you receive the letter from my engineer?
Well, no, I'm talking about, this is a letter from Lisa DeMayo, the engineer for the city.
Yep.
And she says, with regard to 135 Beacon, the one issue, the driveway design has not been approved.
Yep.
That's one, you know how you have to approve the driveway design?
Okay.
And then the second one should, stormwater calculations are required to be submitted and approved. Nothing has been submitted to date despite her requests.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I have never received anything in writing from her, basically through Aaron. Obviously, through the planning board process, every department gets back in writing, whether it's the water department requesting 2 different water lines, and nothing was placed in writing from Mr. Mayo. I heard through Aaron that she wanted some information on the pervious pavers that we proposed. I submitted that to the planning board. They all reviewed it. I have it right here. They have it as well. It was supposed to go through Aaron back to her. I don't know if she ever received that. Again, she was the middle person. She never sent it to me.
Okay.
And I have it here for you. I also have a letter signed by my engineer outlining exactly the fact that essentially through stormwater management, we have a duplex that we're proposing, an existing duplex that really isn't under purview, and then a single-family residence. The single-family residence doesn't fall into stormwater calculations. They made that exempt from the stormwater mandate a couple years ago. I'm not an engineer. So I have a letter here stating that if you don't include the single-family, we're actually reducing stormwater by 14%. By 14, I have it right here if you want to go look at it.
So Bob, the driveway design, would they normally do that after they get approval or from this board, or how would that work? Or is that even something, is that more the engineers?
That would fall similar to the purview of the building code. After things were done at this stage, applicant would come to us and we would make sure it's in compliance. The same thing would apply with engineering and the pavement requirements and the driveway permit.
Okay.
I believe, and Dave can if I'm wrong in this, but I believe the issue with the driveway is basically the type of material and the drainage, and I don't think it's so much the location as it is the material?
Yeah. We've hashed out the material twice. And right in that, in the stormwater report from my engineer that's included, and also a packet regarding the actual pavers they're going to use, that they actually retain all 100% of the water. So actually, per his report, we're actually reducing the pervious surfaces by 14%. And I got to tell you, at the planning board, we met twice, and typically, I know procedural. I put it in writing in an email on Friday. I haven't got a response from the DPD. And again, I don't want to pull George on the hot seat here. I didn't know he was going to be here, but he is a representative from the DPD. I don't know if he's here tonight for this, but procedurally speaking, and I understand this, I can see what the rationale behind it is that typically in something like this, that and when you have a project going before both boards, that the planning board gets a final say, and I can agree with that. Arguably, I've been before them twice, and I had 13 items that we addressed specifically that night. We lied on them the last time I was before the board, and like I said, again, maybe I was a little bit optimistic, but I believed I was going to get a favorable approval that night. So what I'm going to ask this board, and again, I'm open to questions, is to receive a favorable approval on this through the variances that I requested, and request that that you put a condition based on planning board conditions as well. I don't know if it's what my question through you, Mr. Chairman, maybe to DPD is that procedural or is that a legal requirement by the city that the planning board vote first prior to you guys?
I don't know that you, I don't think, if George, if you want to, I don't think you have any problem coming here first. I think it just, if you don't get approvals, it's over. That's the only.
The only condition related to that, and I'm happy to address any other questions that you have on this subject. Even though I didn't come on behalf of the subject tonight, I have learned a lot about it as this discussion has gone forward within our office, and I've actually seen your letter today and had a chance to participate in trying to craft a response to you. But 11411 of the zoning code, the section on site plan review, and addressing special permits as well, basically indicates that where the planning board has a review for something like that, and the zoning board is also doing a variance, that the conditions of the planning board approval be wrapped into as variance approval on that subject. We have generally procedurally addressed that by having the planning board complete their hearing and close it before you make a formal decision. That's procedurally the way we've addressed that. An alternative way to address that, if you saw fit, and it would be breaking from the procedure that we've always followed, would be if you saw fit to grant an approval in a case like this, to grant an approval with the condition that the planning board conditions be wrapped in, and then potentially the building department holding that actual approval letter and writing it after the planning board meeting's complete, so that they didn't have to come back to you, if you see fit to do that. That's the only other way I can think of to do that, if the building department and your board wanted to. Otherwise, the typical method has been to continue and wait until after the zoning planning board hearing is complete, which would be next week.
Right.
Chairman?
Go ahead.
I'd have to agree with George. That might be a good approach, but I also like to remind the board, when it comes to particulars in the technical aspects of driving material or issues with the building code, that when this board grants an approval, it's also expected that they can, not expected, but they'll have to comply with all other departments, in this case the building code or engineering or whatever department's there. So that's an automatic given.
Right, so we don't really have to get into the material.
Some of those
not
details, correct, that's
right,
correct.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, at some point I would like to address the specifics of this particular case to you, but maybe potentially after you let any neighbors, abutters speak,
Okay.
if you get a moment after that, but before you discuss it, because there is some interesting issue related to this particular case.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, so anybody here wish to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? Anybody wish to speak in favor of this petition? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anybody here wish to speak in opposition? Hi. Please, can you please state your name and address and write it down as well on the, we just need to.
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Nancy Lamache, and I live at 255 3rd Street, which is right below this project that he's proposing. And I'm really against the stacked parking, because on the existing two families there, he's got a third stacked parking driveway. So now we're going to have 3 cuts in that small stretch of road. And I think it's a safety hazard with all these we went from no cuts to having all these parking lots come out onto 3rd Street. And this is what we've all been opposed of with this whole project.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition to this petition? Hearing none, that portion, hearing is closed. George?
I guess to some extent, the nuance in the zoning ordinance that this relates to, which became a problem at the point in time of this particular project, but actually relates back to something that was carried from the pre-2004 ordinance to the current ordinance, is a regulation that basically says that in anything, there's an exemption for single-family homes, but basically says that you can't set up a situation where you have to move one car to get to another car. And yet you have single-family home driveways all across the city that do that. And for a single duplex under this circumstance, you can't. And the end result of that, as Mr. Daly pointed out, is that what it actually causes to happen is it causes you, in order to meet that requirement, where you have a typical duplex, and I've seen a number of them built where you have basically a couple of duplexes and you run a driveway down the middle or something and you sort of stack parking in the back. But in this particular house with this particular layout, what it basically means is you're probably doing a driveway down each side and you're basically doing a large parking pad behind. As far as its impact on impervious area, as far as its impact on neighborhood character, as far as its impact on sort of the ability to provide valuable green space for the future owners of the place, it's actually probably less in line with neighborhood character than doing something that most single-family houses typically would do. So I'm not unsure that this isn't something that does require some further review in the zoning ordinance as to whether or not it makes sense to allow this for duplexes, or at least allow the planning board or the zoning board the opportunity to do something other than a variance to do this, so that someone doesn't have to come through a second process in this particular case. And particularly where I think the response to do this has been in response to a number of concerns that as this project has sort of evolved from a compliant project that was presented that the neighbors weren't happy with to something that is legally less compliant with zoning, but seems to have addressed a number of, maybe not all, but a number of the concerns that had been expressed in the neighborhood in the past. So that's just where we are. I honestly think it is something that deserves to be put on the list of zoning changes we may have missed in 2004 that may require another look.
If I understand this correctly,
Yeah.
it appears as though he's somewhat being boxed in. If he doesn't do it, he then invades on the green space and makes it less attractive to the neighborhood, but if he does do it, then the issue becomes just the stacked parking. To me, I would like, the stacked parking seems the lesser of the two evils. And it meets all the requirements for variance.
That seems to be where we are, and essentially the irony I think that he expressed is that when some things happened over in the Highlands a couple of years ago, that we tacked this neighborhood character special permit on, where you add additional units on a lot that used to be just a 1 or 2 units, and you add 2 or more on top of that. You have to go through this planning board process to address neighborhood character issues, and it is through this process that we have come to the conclusion that this is a driveway design that is probably better than the alternative. And it is through this process that is leading the applicant to come to you for a variance on that case, which leads me to ask, in the future, maybe we should make it easier for that process to be done if the process leads in that direction.
All right, thanks, George, for the input.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something? The other thing, what we did too was, I understand what the zoning came from. I've been building in the city for a while, and I saw it all across the city. You guys have seen it all across the city. What happened was these duplexes with the 1 or 2 spots, 2 spots, ended up having 4 people parking there, and that was really the issue. And so they put this regulation in. Moving forward, again, this is going to be something I'm going to go before the planning board, and I think they're already in line to make this change, is the fact that the planning board has to be given some discretion on the actual project itself. And they've kind of handcuffed themselves, unfortunately, with doing something what would seem like a good idea, but in a project like this where you're doing neighborhood character, and this is going to be a big black driveway on each side and really increase substantially the pervious area. Secondly, the other thing too, I also propose, the bottom line is this is a Form A lot. Not to sound arrogant, I didn't have to do a lot of the things I had to do here. I could have put big asphalt driveways in, big parking lot, but I stand behind the stuff I build. So I think this is going to look really good. I think stacked parking with 3 spots will work. There's only two, really, one stacked side of it if you look at it. Secondly, if you look at the single family, it's the exact same concept, and that's legal. The third thing, and most importantly, is I sat down with the neighbors. I said, this is the 2 plans. I said, we have 2 driveways going in the back, or we have stacked parking with some nice pavers, and that would reduce runoff. And they all supported, from what 14, 15 of them, the parking in front. So with that said, I look for your favorable vote on this tonight.
All right, thank you. My feeling is that it's a unique situation. I would have no problem approving it because I wouldn't want to see the alternative. And I think if we don't approve it, then we run the risk of seeing the alternative, which is probably something the neighbors don't want. The neighbors probably don't want either, and I don't blame you for that. But unfortunately, you're not going to have a choice there. So we're the deciding board in this, and I think he's made all the efforts to do everything else to make the project comply with the existing neighborhood and the character of it. So it's something I'd support, but let's see what everybody else say. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Daly, how many spots are we talking about in total?
Total of 6.
6, okay. And is there any parking facing the residence? Is there any parking to the right of the residence, or is it only in the rear of the existing building?
It's parking. They have parking in the existing building. They have parking in the back, and they have parking on the side. There's actually, in the 2-family that I'm selling that's under agreement, I think there's 6 parking spots in that one. So there's plenty of off-street parking. 6 to 7, actually, arguably.
Off-street parking?
Off-street, yeah.
Okay, so on the site itself, is there 6 parking spots that you've designated on the site?
For which lot?
Well, we're talking about the duplex, correct?
The new duplex or I'm sorry.
135 Beacon is the corner lot, correct?
The corner lot, that's the existing house.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
So that's us. No. The one that we're looking for is variance on is Lot C, I believe, which is the proposed duplex. Sorry.
All right, well.
It is confusing.
Maybe that's why I'm confused, because when I drove by the site, the existing 2-family, I guess, it says 135 on the existing building, right?
The engineer won't give me a new address for any of these lots until I get planning board, zoning board, building.
Okay, so we're talking about the rear where it says Unit 1, proposed 2.5-story? Is that what we're talking about?
Let me look at my notes here. I'm even confused.
I'm really confused.
Hold on.
Back here, right?
We're talking about Lot C. Lot C. It's the eastern part. The most.
Okay, yep.
It's the biggest one, too.
11,375. Okay, so it's six parking spots, stacked parking, and is it stacked 3 and 3, or?
Yeah, stacked 3 and 3. No, well, yes, it's stacked 3 and 3 on each side, but only 2 of those are stacked. You can do 1 car, and then the 2 cars stacked.
Okay. And this is a 2-family?
Correct, there's 1, yep.
Now, do you need 4 or do you need 6?
Actually, by code, I need 2 each. If you make 2 curb cuts, they triggers 2 more, 1 per each, so a total of 6.
Okay. So that's how we get the 6, because of the curb cuts?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Jack?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it appears as though the petition is a classic catch-22 first. Secondly, I think DPD and George is 100% correct. This is an issue that at some point is going to have to be addressed, because as the neighborhoods continue to want to address buildings that are deteriorating and want to upgrade, these kinds of issues are going to come again. I would say the petitioner deserves kudos. You get by the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and Pat, and did Anne Marie sit in on the meetings?
No, she didn't. I don't think so. She might have had some leverage in the
That
background.
was your lucky day
I
then.
can imagine.
And I know Anne Marie very well.
Yeah,
She's a
they
great
were great
lady.
to work with, though. They're very passionate. I appreciate that.
And I'm familiar with both ladies, and you're right, they are passionate. The fact that you did the right thing and extended not once but twice to the neighborhood group speaks volumes as far as I'm personally concerned. I know that it's what each of us on the board look for. That being said, in the situation you're currently in, I would agree with the chairman that I would support the petition.
Thanks. Vesna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do concur with Mr. Knott that it's very tough to get a support of the Centerville neighborhood associations, and you did that, and you did met with them twice, and they wrote a letter of support. So that say a lot about you and the work that you've done. We know that by meeting you in the past that you came before the board, you're very credible developers. I know that you have the heart of the city, not just the Centerville neighborhood when you do your project. I do prepare to support this project with conditions that we spoke of earlier. That is that that we as zoning board adopt any planning board condition, and that we, without knowing what kind of material to all that, that we that you are getting an approval, or at least work with the engineering to get those driveway material and the storm water plan in place. With that said, I am prepared to vote in favor of this petition tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Vesna. Corey?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement with my colleagues. Mr. Daly has been in front of this board at least a handful of times during my 6-7 year span, and he's always done a fantastic job. If anything, he goes over and above what's either asked or expected of him, and I don't expect him to be cutting corners on this one. And I understand the neighbors. Some of the neighbors have gotten a little acclimated to a vacant lot there, and that's understandable, but something's going to happen with this land. It's not going to stay vacant forever. And Mr. Daly is certainly the guy I'd like to see there, and I have no doubt the neighborhood will be confident in his work as well. And regarding the stack parking, I think it'll work there without taking from the character of the neighborhood. I'm pretty sure of that. And I do want to move this thing along. I mean, Mr. Daly, he does have several challenges ahead of him besides this board. And I would like to move it off the floor tonight, Mr. Chairman. So do we have that authority without the planning board? And can we move it along?
Yes, we can. And I think that, based on the representations made and based on the plan, I think that based on the size and the shape of the lot that he's dealing with, I don't see that he has any other alternative to do this. So I think he does clearly meet the requirements of a variance. And
I agree with you.
I think that, going back before the planning board, he's going to probably have to do that anyway, right? So he just has to, go along with whatever conditions they impose, so.
Okay, so what would it be, if this were to get approved, Mr. Chairman, what would be the conditions?
I think a motion to approve with the condition that the applicant comply with the conditions imposed on the planning board.
More than fair.
So we need a motion?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, with that being said, I'll make a motion to approve with the following condition, that the applicant comply with the motions, with the conditions set forth by the planning board.
Seconded.
And I need a roll call, Corey?
Mr. Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
I approve with conditions. Mr. Geary?
Approve with conditions?
Mr. Knox?
Approved with conditions.
Mr. Noon?
Approve with condition.
Okay, so you've been unanimously approved. If you can come up and sign the plan and date it, and give it back to Corey, and good luck. Thank you for your time, anybody who spoke tonight. The next petition is ZB 2009, number 57, a special permit and variance request for Mario Silva, 248 Middlesex Street, to allow a body art establishment and to locate the same within 500 feet of a school pursuant to 7.3 of the zoning ordinance. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Christine Jarvis. I am Mario's business partner. I'm going to speak on his behalf this evening. We are petitioning to open a body art establishment at 248 Middlesex Street, and also that is within 500 feet of a school. It is the Lowell Community Charter School, which is K through 8. It's located on Jackson Street, and it's scheduled to move in August of 2010 to the former Prince Spaghetti building off of Moore Street.
When is it scheduled to move, ma'am?
August of 2010.
So next summer. And are they shut down, do you know, from June right until then? Yes, they are. So for all intents and purposes, it's June?
Close,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. All right, so what would you like to tell us?
Well, we're very much interested in that neighborhood, the Jam District. It's an up-and-coming neighborhood that has a lot of potential and growth that will be happening down the line. We are very committed to doing good work, and we really care about Lowell as a community and art in general.
Have you been in this business before, Mr. Silva, or?
I'm his partner, but
Okay.
he's the tattoo artist.
Okay. So you've done this before, sir? You've been
Yes,
in this
I have.
business?
Yes.
And I saw the application, you have your licenses and things
Yes.
like that?
Yep.
So the special permit is clear, but for the reason you need the variance, just so I'm clear, is just to allow you to operate this within 500 feet of a school.
That's correct.
Okay. And you've explained that that's not being replaced by another school.
No, it's not.
No, it's moving.
Okay. All right. Anybody here wish to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? And hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anybody here wish to speak in opposition? Welcome, ma'am.
Karen Bell, 80 Middlesex Street, and I'm here representing JAMBRA, which is the Jackson Appleton Middlesex Business and Residents Association. We have several concerns, and we also have a lot of questions that we hope the board will consider and perhaps pursue further. One of the first things is the assumption that the charter school will be moving. They have not purchased other property as of yet, and in fact, there are considerable questions as to whether that move will actually occur, and certainly not within the time frame as mentioned. Secondly, there is going to be a children's playground, which will be situated directly opposite the address on Middlesex Street that the business intends to occupy. The JAMBRA itself is looking for another school, another charter school to go into that building. We are currently actively speaking to people in the charter school business who are in other parts of the state to see whether they would be interested in coming in. That we feel that that school and that place has been good for the neighborhood and would continue to be so. So we hope that that time frame, and maybe we can hear from the people in the charter school as to whether or not they will actually be leaving the area. The other questions that we have are really about the building itself, and not in particular about the business which would go in. The building itself is not currently in compliance with signage issues, historic signage issues. We also have had recurring problems with the building as far as trash disposal. We have complained several times to the health department about the residents not having dumpsters, et cetera, on premises and not having trash collected and actually just throwing their trash out the windows onto the street and in the back of the building. The owners of the building have not really been very attentive to our requests that they have better trash disposal.
Who is the owner?
Spanis's, I believe. So all of these things considered, we would really like to have these questions further explored. And certainly the owners of the building, who would therefore be responsible for the, probably for the trash removal, to address in particular dumpster issues and health issues on the property.
Now, wouldn't it be better better than not having a business there if a business is located there? So your issue, I guess, is the upkeep.
It's a combination. The upkeep. We also do have questions about the business itself. If you recall, just a week or two ago, another body art business came under purview of the health department, and the sanitary conditions were very much in question, and in fact, the business itself was shut down. I don't know about, I'm sorry, I don't know your history and so on and so forth, and that is another question that we do have. Yes, we do want more businesses in the area, but at the same time, I think we want the area to, all of the people, the business owners and the new places coming into the area, to understand that we have these concerns about compliance with building codes and throughout the area. I mean, it's not just that building in of itself, it's all of the buildings. And if we are going to continue to make positive steps in bringing in good businesses, we have to make sure that these issues are addressed. And to just plunk a business in there that is a business which can, in other places, prove to be a magnet for problems, and just to plunk it in without addressing problems first, I think is something that we don't want to see happen.
Right, and I don't think the board does. I mean, I think we would impose conditions that the owner and the tenant, as an agent maybe of the owner, or at least as a tenant, would have to comply with all the sanitary codes, all the building codes, all the health codes. I mean, everything that they haven't done. If you've been sitting here, you see that, there's a mechanism in place where we can ensure that they do that. So I guess my question is specifically as to this business, do you have any issues as the leader of that group down there with the type of business that they're proposing?
I don't think it's the type of business so much. Again, it's the
property itself.
The more it's the property itself, and putting a business which is, again, attracts very often questionable activity. I mean, as it has in other businesses of its nature, and I'm not saying that specifically to you. And hopefully, and one of the reasons I'm trying to tread very lightly on that subject is that we're kind of an edgy neighborhood, and with a lot of characters and a lot of character, and it doesn't mean that you won't fit very comfortably in and be welcomed and hopefully become part of our neighborhood group. But again, I really am very concerned about the trash situation there.
And that can be easily addressed, but I think when the new courthouse goes, you're going to find a lot more characters down there than you probably
I
already
know.
have.
Do we get a chance before you to discuss that issue?
Not tonight, but I'm sure you will. But I think maybe if when you're done, Karen, we can talk to the applicants and see what, maybe they've already talked to this, or maybe it's already been negotiated as to, I'm sure you don't want to move into a place that's dilapidated and disgusting over there, so maybe there's some middle ground.
We have been in this space. It's something we can certainly work with.
Okay. I have to interrupt. You have to speak from the podium. It's just a process that we have to follow, so I'm sorry.
We have been in the space. Mario's license and the shop's license is issued by the Board of Health. We have to adhere to health code sanitation regulations, which we feel very strongly about. The shop she's speaking about that got shut down 2 weeks ago, we're former employees of, and we left that shop because of those sanitation issues. That is the reason why we left. So it's, my standards are high. I want to keep them that way. I understand the neighborhood. I very much would love to be part of that neighborhood and help it be great and grow. The playground across the street, I mean, the neighborhood is still edgy. I don't want to lure in children to get tattoos. That's not my intent. I don't want anyone to get tattoos that hasn't given it enough thought. I think it's a great little neighborhood. In terms of the signage, I have read the zoning codes in terms of that area being a historic area. I know that there's not a person in that building that's complying with any of those zoning codes. I've read the codes, I know what they are. I know you don't want neon in the windows, and I know you don't want things protruding off the buildings, and we're happy to comply with that.
Well, would you be opposed to a brief continuance where you can speak to Ms. Bell and her group and see if, it sounds like you both, your interests align here. It sounds like, you want to put a good business in, they want a good business in. Maybe it just, maybe the meeting will be productive and you can come back here and they can find some common ground and make it a little bit easier for us so we understand better exactly what the neighborhood issues are as far as the neighborhood business there, and your issues is coming into the neighborhood. I mean, a lot of times these things are done in advance, but a lot of times applicants aren't aware of who they should talk to, so they just assume somebody will contact them. If you've heard tonight, it is better that if people do face that issue with addressing the neighborhood groups before they come here, but it often doesn't happen that way and because people just don't know. So a lot of times how we've dealt with that issue is we've suggested that the applicant agreed to a brief continuance, maybe till the next meeting, give you plenty of time to talk to them, and maybe the other board members are going to say, listen, when you come back next time, these are my questions, and it gives you, and because I have some questions too, and I think you'd end up with a continuance anyway, or you can just take a risk and go for the vote. But I think if you really want to get your business there and you want to do it the right way,
I'd like to do it the right way, and
yeah.
I'd like to work.
Well, let's see if there's anybody else that has any input on this before we go any further. Okay. Are you done, Karen?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
Fred Faust, 52 Lawrence Drive, Lowell, Mass. More on a point of information, I think the board is going in the right direction, and maybe based on the precedent you said earlier on the hearings, in addition to meeting with a neighborhood group, representatives of DPD could be present because they have the technical capacity to review issues, signs, uses, hours, and maybe could make some constructive suggestions. So I would just want to throw that in. And the other thing I would just wonder about, and maybe again this could be part of the discussion or deliberation by the board, but I'm not sure where the hardship is here. A hardship, this is a pre-existing condition, there's a school here, so I'm not quite sure where the hardship is that this variance is addressing, but I'll just throw that out for the record.
And that was, I guess, one of the questions I wrote down that I'd want you to look into and, explain to us, where the variance, you meet the standards for a variance. And that's something you can discuss with everybody if you meet as a group. I think it's a good idea for DPD. I mean, it saves a lot of issues that we have to bring up. Maybe you can address them in advance if everybody got together, if there's one time where everybody can meet and go over these things. You do have a lot of issues if you're starting a new business. Signage, you've got to comply with everything as far as that goes. I'm not even sure you have all the requests for relief that you need. Maybe you do, but that's something you should look into as well to see if you could need any further relief. I'd even encourage you to have the owner of the building participate in this if you can do that, because you're the tenant, you're going to be paying them, so you're going to suffer the consequences of what he doesn't do. So, or she, I don't know who owns it, but that's another thing you might want to look into. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, we have the commissioner here and George from Planning and Development. I'm wondering if we can get an update to see what is going on with the charter school, because it was my understanding they were moving because lack of a playground. They didn't have a place for children to go out, and so is there any,
Could we put you on the spot again, George, before you depart the city?
I'll weigh in before George while he's
Okay.
on his way.
All right.
I met with that development team just last Thursday, myself and several other departments. They seem to be very aggressive in retrofitting that building for a school. We touched a lot across we touched a lot of points, and I don't think we uncovered some of the problems they're going to have, or they're going to have to overcome to actually make that happen. I think it's a little early to say that they're going to be moving exactly on that date, although this was a very aggressive team and a very well-informed team across the board. So I think when the board makes a decision, just as a point of information, that when the board makes a decision, whether or not the school is there at that given date, I don't think should be a consideration. I don't think that this variance should be weighed on other merits instead of that. It's a pretty big project that they're looking to undertake, and that building is actually going to have mixed uses, educational and factory, and it's allowed. But there were some issues that came out, that surfaced the other day that address the building code that they're going to be looking at, and I don't know that they can overcome those in that time frame.
Okay, but the only thing I was thinking that they had, and I was presuming that they had that, the reason why they were coming in for a variance was because the school, the hardship presented would be the school was going to be moving, and it's not there right now, and that in and of itself could give rise to meeting the standards of the variance, and that's what I presume that's what they were doing.
Based on the professionals I met last Thursday, and I repeat myself by saying they are very aggressive, and there is one heck of a team in trying to get this accomplished. And in spite of that, I don't know that they can meet that deadline, and the reason these folks are here tonight is because of the school. To make an assumption that school will be relocated at that date would not be a good assumption at this point.
I do think what may be a reasonable assumption is that between now and, I mean, are you doing another meeting in December, or when you're saying?
No, the next meeting is January 11th.
You're talking January 11th. Between now and January 11th, I think we're going to see a lot of decision one way or the other on whether or not the charter school can pull this off, and if they are going to, can pull this off before the beginning of the 2010 school year, because and to some extent it's either going to work or it isn't, and there's a lot of other moving parts in the midst of all of this. So I think that in the very near future there will be some direction on how this may or may not work, and it may be able to further inform that question in the time frame of the potential continuance. I mean, they have had meetings with department heads, and they have talked about the discussion about doing it. It does seem like for the quantity and the size of the development project, they're doing an incredibly aggressive schedule to be able to move that building through that time frame when they still haven't even finished the acquiring process. And yet at the same time, it seems like a very interesting possibility to be in a site that would allow them some ability to do some more things that they can't do where they are. So but one thing or another, it's definitely safe to say that school has been looking for other sites, whether it be this one or something else. The discussion, for example, Karen Bell's discussion about the idea that they may want to move another type of school organization into there. I mean, the ordinance originally was done to try to ensure that we basically didn't get collections of the body art establishments too close to schools, and that has potentially been established with those buffers. So that's kind of where it is, and I don't know, but maybe by next month we'll have a better answer as to what's going on with that charter school.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe more reason for continuance. I can just tell you, my feeling will be if there's going to be a school there, then I'm probably not willing to support it. If there's not going to be a school there, I probably am willing to support it, and I think that could be a basis for a variance.
The other thing I will say is I will offer that if there's any interest, I mean, I believe that's in the historic district there as well, if I'm correct. So between our design planning staff, our urban renewal project manager who oversees the jam area issues, and the historic board administrator, I'm happy to have any or all of those people make sure to be in a meeting either with the JAMBR group or separately from the JAMBR group with the applicants to address any particular conditions and concerns that we could address in the next month.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, George.
Sure.
Ma'am?
My only other point I wanted to make with regard to the school is that it is K through 8. The children are very young, and that it's sort of off their radar in terms of getting a tattoo.
I think I'm just laughing, but I see kids running around, including my kids, with the little tattoos that they put on that it washes off by the end of the day. So the kids are aware of tattoos, and my feeling would be that it's even more of a reason not to allow it if it's K through 8 rather than, a high school. That's just my feeling. I mean, I think that's the whole purpose of it, at least how I read it. But if the school's not going to be there, I don't have a problem. I think you do meet the requirements of a variance if you can figure out how. But if the school's going there, I don't think I can support this. Just to give you a heads up, but I'm willing to hear anything after the meeting if you can get everybody on board and explain that how you're going to be able to buffer yourself from a school and discreetly market your business. I'm willing to hear anything like that. But if the school's only going to be there from January until they're out of school at June or February, when you actually start your business till out of June, I have no problem with that either. I don't think there's, those months are going to do anything, especially if the school's in the process of leaving. So, I think the best route is a continuance here until our next meeting, Corey, is January 11th, right?
January 11th, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And, ma'am, would that give you enough time to, you can get Fred and Karen's information tonight? You can meet with them. You can call the planning department. You can call Mr. Camacho, the building department, and it would be on you to kind of coordinate this. Hopefully they will. If you come back here on the 11th and you tell me nobody would agree to meet with you, then, we'll just go forward with the petition. So they've represented that they're willing to meet with you, so we'll take them at their word for that. And I think it will be a productive meeting.
Okay.
I mean, they want businesses there, and your business is not, aside from the fact that could possibly be a school there, your business may fit in there well.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so we have to actually vote on this first. So we need any discussion from the board? Bill, anything?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Jack?
I agree in a couple parts with you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly would not be in favor of the petition in regards to a school being there. And I, with all due respect to the petitioner, I don't have any tattoos. However, trying to be as politically correct and with no intended offense to the petitioner, there was a comment that Karen Bell meant that I will have a tendency to agree with. There are certain establishments, and even establishments that not necessarily a tattoo parlor, but even establishments that are open at inappropriate hours of the day. For example, it could be a sub shop. We have one here in the city that has particular problems because of the hours of operation, and it draws a particular clientele. They get great sandwiches at that particular establishment, but the hours that it open draw a clientele. I think that is an inference that I want to be politically correct. I don't want to offend you, but I would have a tendency to agree. I happen to be in a couple of businesses. One of the businesses puts me up in the Lakes region at Lake Winnipesaukee, and they have quite a few of those particular establishments. I would dare say there aren't many individuals going in three-piece business suits who go in to get a tattoo, with all due respect. So there is a particular image that perhaps is something that's open for discussion with the association, but that's just my opinion, and I certainly don't mean any offense. It's just a comment and an observation, I guess, from my own life experiences. I don't have a positive or negative opinion about what you do, but there are particular individuals, again, that are more prone to tattoos. I think it was brought to the attention of that particular establishment that you mentioned. Unfortunately, the timing doesn't bode the best for you to make the presentation right after something like that occurred. But I would take it under advisement and wait for the results when we come back for the continuation. Those would be the comments I would make. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And Bill, you said nothing? And Vesna?
No comments, sir.
Corey?
Yes, I'm in agreement with my colleagues, Mr. Chairman. I would like to see a continuance on this, sit down with Karen Bell, Jambra, the neighborhood group, and to see basically the destination of that charter school, and is a school going to move in there in the future. I mean, I know the applicant's trying to do the right thing. I think they're going to try, they want to create a new business, and we're for new businesses down there, that's for sure, but it's the nature that that puts me on the fence, unfortunately, and I don't mean to offend you in that sense, but I mean, there is, to the contrary, to the petitioner's defense, I mean, there is a homeless shelter right behind it, and there's a courthouse being built, which we're all very happy, but that's going to basically have criminals and sex offenders in and out almost on a daily basis. And
Alleged criminals.
alleged. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But no one's complaining about that, so. All right, but I do support the continuance. Thank you very much.
Okay. And Rick, anything?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I got to ask a question. Was it mentioned that it's in a historic district?
Yes.
True?
Yeah, I think it is.
So is that part of the regulations that this falls under? Does it situate, I mean, is it explained in 7.3.1?
Well, no, it would have to follow whatever regulations that the historic deem appropriate. Any changes to the building, signage, that type of thing.
So how does this get handled with historic as it applies to us?
Well, one way to, well, in general, to go back to what we were speaking of earlier, that if you folks, this board will not have to worry about the technical aspects of certain things, certain piece of lumber that needs to be used, or a header for, the same thing applies to historic and engineering. Those details and those technical aspects which are reserved for the board, and the general consensus here is that whatever approvals this board gives under whatever conditions, that they're also compliant, obviously, with whatever other boards that are out there or permit granting authorities, such as the building department or the historic board. I think it would be in the applicant's best interest to visit the historic board and find out what they would require, to make sure that these requirements wouldn't, for lack of a better phrase, break the bank.
Well, I guess my question is more around, should the historic board been here, or do they get notified when something like this comes up?
They'll probably get
Just
notified.
as procedural, I'm asking a procedural question, I guess.
No, I don't think they would.
Okay.
I don't think they would in a case like this. But it would be in the applicant's best interest to look into that, to find out what would be required if, in fact, it was approved by this board. Just to make sure they can come into compliance, and for no other reason than monetary reasons, that whatever compliance requirements are made, that they wouldn't break the bank. And I think that's something that this board and the historic would be considering, but it would probably be some sort of an arrangement between the tenant and the landlord as to who does what.
Well, that was the other reason I was asking. I think if you look at that block of businesses that are in that building, and I think of historic, I don't drive by there and think of that as historic. And I know, to Ms. Bell's point about, I know when I took a ride by and I went around back, the first thing I noticed was I think there was one disposal unit there that was totally, there was enough in there that it was all fallen out. But I also know with body art, there's certain conditions from a health code perspective that he's going to have to meet anyway. So I don't want to belabor the point, but when I heard about historic, I just wanted to get an understanding what that meant in regards to our purview of this application.
I think that the historic has more say as to the building, the structure, and the overall exterior appearance versus actually what takes part inside, the nature of the business.
What's that, Bill? Anybody else, Corey?
No, Mr. Chairman. Before I make a motion to continue, though, the petition obviously has several obstacles ahead of them, so I just want to make it clear that you know, what your duties are, especially with the neighborhood group and the historic board, so you have, anything else I may be missing?
I think they've listened to everything, right? They know. So we just, if the board agrees, we'll continue it to the 11th, and I think everybody knows what they're supposed to do. You
Okay.
know?
That being said, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to continue till January the 11th, 2010.
Second.
All, roll call, Corey?
Mr. Bailey?
Continue to January 11th?
I vote to continue. Mr. Geary?
Continue to January 11th?
Mr. Knox?
Continue to January 11th.
Mr. Noon?
Continue.
So, ma'am, you've been unanimously voted to continue this to January 11th. There'll be no further public notice requirement. Anybody wishing to speak in favor or in opposition to that petition can appear that evening. And you heard what we said, so I'd stay in touch with either Mr. Camacho, somebody from the planning department, and certainly Ms. Bell and Mr. Faust, if you can, okay?
Thank you for the
All
time.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the final petition we have is ZB 2006-78. This is an administrative review of a previously granted relief regarding 790, 816, 824, 836, and 826.1 Chelmsford Street. This is the Lowe's project, represented by Attorney George Elides. Mr. Elides.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, George C. Elides, Jr., 133 Market Street, Lowell. And I'm here this evening with Sherry Clancy, whom I'll introduce to you in a minute. But from an administrative standpoint, I have a few things I'd like to pass out to the board. I didn't know whether or not you'd have a copy of the actual decision, the original one from 2007, and the subsequent one when we came back here in May for an amendment. And so I have those here.
We actually have those. I think they were in, I think Kim had put those in our package.
You do have them?
Yep.
Great, that's wonderful. So the other document I have is...
Or somebody, at least we have one copy of it.
Well, I have extras if anyone's interested.
Does anybody not have a copy of this?
Ricky's got it.
Okay. I also have a report from the consultants on this, as well as a report from the traffic engineer to Mr. Proakis, and Mr. Proakis, I think, is going to be helping to give information to the board, as well as Commissioner Camacho. So I'm going to take it easy tonight. I'm just going to pass out a little of this stuff to begin with. These are the two decisions, if anyone needs a copy of that. These are the consultants relative to conditions.
Here it is. Did you forget this? No? There's a couple more right here. You need more? There's 3 more right here, George, if you need them. 4 more. George, there's more here. Do you need more? You left more over here. There's 4 more. Do you need these?
So it was over 3.5 years ago that this petition was initially filed, And January 7th, 2007 will be the third anniversary of the vote of this board granting the variances and permits for the construction of the Lowe's store. Since that time, a lot of things have happened, which I think you're well aware of, but the best thing that's happened in my mind is that the store is essentially built. In order to make sure, if you recall, between the zoning board and the planning board, there were over 50 conditions on this particular project. I think it's the most conditioned project that I've ever dealt with, and maybe ever had that many in the history of the city. So I worked initially with a gentleman, if you recall, by the name of Brian Clancy for National Development. Sam Wolf did a little time for us last summer and was with me the last time. And I now have, there's a little nepotism in National Development. I now have Brian Clancy's sister, Sherry Clancy, who's been working on the project, making sure that everything's been done properly. She has been coordinating with the building commissioner, with George and the people at DPD to make sure that all of our conditions are met and that everything's been going along well. I'm going to turn it over to Sherry because she can give you an idea of what she's done and the company's done. I think Mr. Camacho and George are both also ready to answer any questions that anybody might have relevant to those things. So without further ado, as they say, Sherry Clancy.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So it looks like I'm batting cleanup here on this project tonight. And what I'd like to do first is just to give the board a little update on where we are with the project, and just so you're informed about what the upcoming milestones are.
Can you move the mic? It's just off. It was over towards George,
Well,
but
George was trying to do all the talking there. Is that better?
that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So I just thought you might like to get an update on what milestones we have coming up right away. The building is rapidly coming to a conclusion as far as the construction goes. The site is just about 90% done, maybe 95% done, with some little landscaping touch-ups and things we're working on now. And they're anticipating that they're going to be seeking an occupancy permit sometime around January 5th. Right after everyone gets back from the break, they'll be in there trying, the builder that's building the store will be trying to get an occupancy permit. Then Lowe's will come and take possession of a store the third week in January. So in between the time that the occupancy permit is issued and the Lowe's actually steps in to take possession of the store, they'll be doing some extra racking and some other things that have to do with actually stocking the store and fixturing the store. The target date to open the store is the last week in February right now. And what I'm trying to accomplish is, because there were so very many conditions on this project, and some were for the planning board and some were from your board, I thought it would be a good idea just to go through all the conditions and make sure that we're able to demonstrate to the board and to Mr. Camacho that we have actually satisfied the conditions that were required for them to get an occupancy permit. And so I have what's in your packet that we just finished passing out to you is a certificate from our engineer, which basically deals with a lot of the site conditions. And there were some traffic conditions that George had a report for. And then lastly, there was operating conditions, which Lowe's is going to be submitting a letter to Mr. Camacho as well, affirming their or confirming and acknowledging their operating conditions, and that they're what they're going to be living under as the project goes forward. Do you want to jump in and explain what the rest of these are, or do you want to do the conditions one by one, or how do you want to do it?
Well, no, I certainly don't want to do the conditions one by one. I think we'd be here for another 5 hours if we did, but I suffice it to say that, and again, subject to Commissioner Camacho saying otherwise, George, suffice it to say that as far as the construction and getting ready business, we've put in the traffic lights, we've changed all the intersections. Anyone who's been up there can see what a remarkably different situation there is up there. Our purpose, I think, at this point, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, would be to, assuming that these gentlemen would confirm what I just said to you, to allow us, because the next thing that that Lowe's is going to be looking for is an occupancy permit. And it would seem to me appropriate that at this point where the greater part of the conditions have basically been met, except for the things that relate to operating once they get in there, I'd like to get sort of like an approval that we've met the things that we're supposed to do, subject to a final approval from the building commissioner to monitor and make sure that whatever operating or additional things need to be done can be crossed off by him.
I would just interject that we're scheduled to go before planning board next Monday night to do this exact same thing with planning board.
Right.
And so I would never expect you to speak for planning board.
Yeah.
Although some of the conditions that were imposed by this board were related to traffic measures, and they were really things that needed input from your traffic engineer. They weren't anything that we had within our control per se. So I think those are the ones where I'm really more focused on, which would be like in the memo that George had, just to make sure that we've exercised everything we're supposed to do in that regard.
Okay, I guess maybe to kind of sum it up, we're looking at these conditions, and I read them, and it looks like mostly everything's complied with. Are there any issues that you weren't able to comply with, or are there any conditions that are not met that are not related to operating?
One of the principal things that we're related to is the traffic engineer, with reference to one of the items that the board put in as a condition was 90 days of police details. And first of all, the traffic engineer has indicated he's going to do a study, a before and after study, once the store opens. And he suggested that it would be better, he doesn't believe it probably would be needed at that point, and he suggested, I think you'll see from his recommendation, that he come back to the board with a report in 30 days after the store opening to let you know what the traffic conditions are and whether or not another 60 days are warranted.
That's on the other memo, not the one that you're looking at.
Right.
Right.
What would be Lowell's objection to just sticking with the doing the detail?
First of all, we have one signal that's already there. So, I mean, it seems somewhat to beg the question to expect to have a traffic, detail at a signalized intersection. And so I think the suggestion is that, when the store is first opening and people are first finding their way, maybe the first month of Saturdays or whatever, have a police detail on hand to make sure the signal is operating and the timing doesn't need to be adjusted. I think that's fine, but it just seems to be kind of, a double work, if you will, for have a police detail sitting at an intersection that already has a light there. The other intersection, which is on Wellman Street, the traffic engineer and the planning department, George,
address that. Actually, I guess the fundamental concern with putting a detail at the Wellman Street intersection is that we actually requested that Lowe's remove the traffic light at the Wellman Street intersection, mainly because we wanted to do everything we could to discourage people from using it, especially people heading in directions that would then cause them to want to cut through the neighborhood side streets. My biggest concern with putting a detail there the first 90 days is that what we're essentially doing is we're making it very easy for people to exit that street and then use a side street like Norcross or Jeunesse Street to cut back over to Stevens and head towards points beyond there. And that if we get people into the habit of doing that and make it easy for them to do that in the first 90 days, they will fall into that habit, and that we will actually increase the cut-through traffic on the side streets. The traffic engineer came back to us from Lowe's very early on and said, if you don't put a signal at that, you're running the risk of having delays at that intersection up to 30, 60, 90 seconds. And I said, well, if you have a 30 or 60 or 90 second delay for people getting out of there, hopefully that will train most traffic to go back to the Lowe's Way Industrial Avenue intersection to leave the Lowe's store and exit onto the main roads away from the neighborhood streets rather than coming through the neighborhood. So my concern, and I think our traffic engineer's concern was reflected in his memo, was that anything that we do to try to encourage people to use that as an exit, other than just if they're turning right on Chelmsford Street and heading towards downtown Lowell because they live there or something of that effect, would actually attempt to potentially train traffic to use the side streets for cut-through, which is something that we were trying to discourage. So our feeling was to leave that as kind of open as possible as a way of trying to encourage people to go use the other routes as the main routes in and out of the store. And that's kind of where we came from that from the very beginning when we made the recommendation not to have the light there. And that's kind of where we are today. What he has proposed to do, I think, makes a lot of sense. Our traffic engineer is going to drop traffic counters on all of the side streets up through, probably through Norcross or Janess, all the way along that stretch between where Chelmsford and Stevens splits in the next couple of weeks on a typical weekday afternoon peak or something that's a logical time frame, or a Saturday, and get traffic counts for those time frames. And then we can go back in March, do that over again, and see if we're having a cut through traffic impact even with the circumstances we're doing, to see what adjustments could be made to do that.
Okay, and when is projected opening day?
Late February?
At the end of February, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense to figure out where, if you do need a detail, where's the best place to do it, so.
Yeah, I mean, the original request was potentially to do 90 days at both intersections. I think what the traffic engineer came back with was suggesting you do the first 14 days, put someone at the traffic light, and the first month of Saturdays, put someone at the traffic light, and at 30 days, have the police who are out there talk to the traffic engineer to see if there are signal timing issues or traffic backup issues there, as well as using the counts of the side street. And at day 30, we would come back to the zoning board with a report on that and address any additional concerns that need to be addressed. Maybe the signal timings need to be tweaked, maybe something needs to be fixed to address the side street cut through, but we would know that better at that point in time.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
I just have one other question. Some of the conditions that were on your approval were things that were we were to do if and only if they were approved by the city council, some of these traffic calming measures. But the traffic engineer has chosen not to take them before the city council. So we just kind of wanted to visit that with you and understand that we had fulfilled the obligation as far as we could take the obligation. If the traffic engineer doesn't think it merits it, there's not really a lot we can do.
Right, I think a lot of those conditions we put in before this project really evolved, and a goal was to make sure that there wasn't going to be, all these clusters of traffic jams all over the place. So if the traffic engineer doesn't think that we'll defer to them. At least I will.
Again, to explain, I think there's two in particular on there. One was about posting. There was one that specifically referred to posting streets as local traffic only, which our staff indicated with us was inconsistent with engineering standards and couldn't be done. I thought it could be, but apparently I learned something from this, that they can't do that. And particularly the biggest challenge was that it does not allow enforcement of that regulation by police. Police can't pull people over and ask if they're local traffic or not, so it's a completely unenforceable regulation. In addition to that, he went on to basically say he was going to do the before and after traffic counts, and we and Lowe's would kind of review that afterwards and see if there was anything to do that could potentially address that. And then the other one that was a concern was there was a request for a three-way stop sign at a particular intersection. It doesn't meet warrants for a three-way stop sign. Typically, if a similar request came from a counselor, we would send back the letter saying it doesn't meet warrants for a three-way stop sign, we can't do it. So in the same vein, he looked at it, he checked the numbers, and it doesn't meet, there's a standard set of requirements under which you can do that, and he's saying it doesn't meet the warrants for that. As again, he's the expert on that, and I defer to him in that way, but we wanted to bring back that memo to say that we investigated both of those things, and that was a concern that came back. The other thing was the recommendation to look at potentially making Wellman Street right turn only if approved by the city council, and the concern with that, it was a viable and interesting option that was worth looking at, and we did spend some time looking at it, but we do believe that if you can't turn left and head back to the light at Stevens Street, traffic there would then proceed to turn right and then take the first left on Norcross and shoot straight across there. Again, it would actually create more cut-through traffic, not less, if you kind of do the analysis. But again, we would kind of keep an analysis of all of this stuff going forward and see what the impacts are based upon those issues. So that's I think that covers all of the ones that were Board of Appeals conditions, and then the Planning Board conditions as well had a couple things that we investigated to the best of our ability. But so those are, like 4 or 5 of your 18 or 19 conditions that were placed on this.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
So that basically, I think, again, would defer to the traffic engineer for that. So I don't see that being a big issue. Anything else that you saw that was?
It was all about making Mr. Camacho's job easier.
All right, Bob, do you see any issues that we need to address for them to get a CO?
We'll take all the help we can get, and I really appreciate what she did. Actually, this is a pretty good plan. What'll happen, just so the board understands, what'll happen is we'll be checking, because some of these details get very specific, and to be honest with you, a little involved, and fall upon either planning or another board or a specific individual such as traffic. Excuse me. So what'll happen is, prior to issuing the final permit, the occupancy permit, and we don't like to issue temporaries, we like to issue a permanent, and which we probably will in this case. We're going to get approvals from all other departments to make sure that they've been satisfied to a point where we can open this place and they can turn it on and get this place going. Then, with the condition and understanding, and I think Lowe's agrees with this, because we've had a couple of meetings, that if any modifications, any reasonable modifications that have to be made to keep it up and running, be it traffic or lighting or something else, that they'd be more than willing to look at that. And I think monitoring the operation in the first 30, 60, and 90 days would help do that. I don't anticipate anything. I was just out there again the other day, and they're actually looking pretty good.
Okay.
There is an ongoing condition that Lowe's is affirming to, that is, if there is other future traffic measures that's proposed by the city, that they will support them. There is an ongoing condition.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that relates back to the issue of the, that relates to the issue of the, of the side street counts. I mean, if we do the side street counts, and we and the neighbors come to the conclusion that there's a cut-through issue, and that cut-through issue says, you know, if we make this one way or that one, or you make this narrower, or do this or do that, it will affect it. Lowe's has agreed through their conditions that they wouldn't oppose, and they would work with us in trying to address how to impact and do any of those. I generally caution against that, only because my worry is that unless we're really careful about how we do it, a one-way street pattern actually can make cut-through traffic even worse rather than better and faster, which is a particular concern when no one knows a car is going to come in the people know a car's not going to come in the opposite direction. They'll drive even faster down a side street. So I'm reluctant to do that unless, you know, we reach a point where we come to a conclusion that that actually addresses an issue. But first we want to see whether or not there would even be an issue to address. There is one other remaining outstanding issue that I just want to make you aware of. The landscaping buffer along Chelmsford Street has been substantially completed, has a little bit more tweaking to do. Rachel went out and took a look at it. It is completely consistent with the plan that was presented to you at the point in time when those multiple plans were presented. We have received a couple of pieces of feedback from a few neighbors that their particular views across from them and in certain angles are not exactly as intense or as beefed up as they want to, and Shari and Lowe's and National Development have pledged to work with us, and what we may potentially do is put together something that the result may result in a plan that is even more enhanced and has more landscaping than the one that you approved. But if there's no objections to adding to your plan, although we're not subtracting from it, that may help potentially address some late neighborhood concerns and kind of make things work a little bit better. And we'd like to be able to pursue that without the need to come back. But we've just heard from a couple people, a couple pieces of feedback that, you know, they're at the spot where they can see a lot more through the fence than they thought they could, just because of the way that landscaping works. So we can kind of touch up bits and pieces of it probably in the springtime based upon a plan we'll put together now.
Yeah, we're gonna post a bond with the planning board next week when we go to cover any of these additional items.
Great. So I guess the vote would be to say that you've substantially complied with all the conditions, and then you can go ahead and get your CO.
I think that's what I'm looking for you.
On the evidence that we've...
Based on what you've submitted tonight.
And I'm just going to suggest, Chairman Gary, that we would, I think it's a good idea based on some of the things we just discussed, we would be willing to come back the first meeting after 30 days have elapsed, after the store opens, so that there's a report. And
just a further review date?
Right.
Okay, and that makes sense. Everybody agree with that?
You think 30 days might be a little too soon, Mr. Chairman?
Well, he's saying 30 days after they open?
Prior to opening, yeah, I understand that.
No, for 30 days after they open.
More than 30 days, the first meeting, more than 30 days after they've opened, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to get an idea.
Okay.
So it'd be a review, 30 days.
Review 30 days after the store, the first meeting after the store opens.
Right.
So if the store opens in February, we don't meet for 2 weeks, 30 days beyond that. Any feedback? Anybody want to comment? All right.
Was that the only condition, Mr. Chairman, that would you
I think so.
like to set forth?
I think so. So we need a vote to approve the fact that Lowe's has substantially complied with the conditions set forth by this board in order to get their CO, their certificate of occupancy. And with the condition, I think that they mark it up for review 30 days after the first meeting after the store opens.
Mr. Chairman, I make an approval, make a motions that for approval that the petitioner has met most, if not all, the conditions set forth by this board, and that the petitioner is to return for another review after the store is 30 days after the store open.
30 days after the first meeting after the store opens.
The first meeting after the store opens.
Yeah.
Sounds good, though.
Yeah.
The first meeting
First
of
meeting
April.
in April. How about
First
that?
meeting in
That's,
April. All right.
Seconded.
and I need a roll call.
Mr. Bailey? Approve. I vote to approve. Mr. Geary?
Approve?
Mr. Knox? Approve. Mr. Noon?
Approve.
Mr. Chairman, if the board would indulge me for one more minute, I found out, much to my dismay this week, that Mr. Proakis, who I think is one of the finest people who's worked, I can say this now that the vote is over, who I think is one of the finest people who's ever worked in the planning department in the city of Lowell, is leaving us, and it's with great regret on my part, and I think a great loss to the city, but I think the whole world, or whoever out in television land is listening, should know what I believe, and I think you'll all concur with me, is a wonderful job that he's done for the city of Lowell.
Yeah, I agree. He's done a great job. We'll miss him.
A loss for us, but a gain for Somerville.
Yeah.
Thank you all very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks. Okay, and we just need, I need a motion to approve the minutes of those dates.
Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the June 22nd, 2009 minute, and July 27, 2009 minute, and August 10, August 24th, and September 28th of that same year, sir.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Minutes are approved. Need a motion? Any further business?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Need a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Meeting adjourned.
Hey, Steve, what were the conditions again for